In the shadows where truth and tales intertwine, we find the thrilling, the chilling, the downright spine-tingling. From the paranormal to the peculiar, every echo has a story. Dare to delve into the unexpected, the unexplained? Brace yourself, for you're about to embark on a journey where fear meets fascination. Stay tuned if you dare, for stories that will make your heart race and your mind ponder. Welcome to the realm of the eerie, the realm of the unknown. And remember, like and subscribe, if you dare. I am a retired park ranger, having served the wilderness for over 57 years, and I have some stories to share that will make your blood run cold. Just a few months into my post, I had my first eerie encounter, a strange little girl vanishing into the woods. It was the beginning of a series of inexplicable events. Odd animal noises that didn't belong to any creature I knew of, a constant sense of being watched, and odors that were beyond unsettling. Some days, the air would carry the smell of sulfur. Other days, the stench of death that could make your stomach churn. I tried to shake it off, attributing these anomalies to the quirks of the great outdoors. But then, I met my colleague, Clive, a seasoned ranger. And that's when I learned these odd occurrences weren't just part of the job. They were warnings, echoes from the forest's unseen depths. I thought these odd occurrences were just part of the job until I met my colleague, Clive. Clive, a seasoned ranger, once warned me that if I ever smelled sulfur or anything so strong it made my stomach churn, I should run and not look back. That was during an afternoon trek deep into the forest, where the towering trees seemed to swallow up all light and sound. Clive, with his weather-beaten face and eyes that had seen too much, was my guide into the wilderness. As we journeyed past the point where most rangers dared not tread, he shared his wisdom. The words fell from his lips like stones, heavy and ominous. The moment he mentioned the sulfuric stench, I felt a chill run down my spine, a memory of a similar smell creeping back into my consciousness. I asked him about it, the fear in my voice unmistakable. His answer was a simple shake of his head, his eyes focusing on something beyond my sight. "Do you smell that?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. I hadn't noticed it at first, but then it hit me, an overpowering odor that made my eyes water. The same stench he had warned me about. Clive insisted that I run back to the ranger station while he stayed behind. His eyes held a serious gleam, and in that moment, I knew better than to question him, so I ran, my heart pounding in my chest, the smell of sulfur clinging to my nostrils. My arrival at the ranger station was met with surprise. George, the senior ranger, stood abruptly upon hearing my tale, his face pale. He asked me to guide him back to where I had left Clive. But when we returned, Clive was gone. His footprints cut off abruptly, as if he had been yanked into the sky. I told George about the smell, the warning, but he merely nodded, a hint of nervousness in his voice. He assured me Clive would be okay. But I knew better. I knew I wouldn't see Clive again. I ran back to the ranger station, not knowing that it would be the last time I saw Clive. As I returned to the station, I informed George, another senior ranger, about the incident. His usually jovial face turned serious as he listened to my recount, the silence of the room only broken by the occasional crackle of the radio. Without a word, George grabbed his coat, his face set in grim determination, and motioned for me to lead him back to where I'd last seen Clive. The forest was eerily quiet as we retraced my steps, our footfalls muffled by the thick carpet of leaves and pine needles underfoot. George, who had always seemed invincible to me, was now showing signs of concern, which only amplified my own anxiety. We followed Clive's footprints, a trail of crushed foliage and disturbed earth, deeper and deeper into the woods. Then, as abruptly as they had begun, the footprints stopped. Right there in the middle of the trail, as if Clive had been plucked straight out of his boots and lifted into the sky. We searched the surrounding area, but it was as if the forest had swallowed him whole. There was no sign of a struggle, no scraps of clothing caught on the branches, no blood. Just an empty forest and a trail that ended in the middle of nowhere. I recall George's face as he stared at the spot where Clive's footprints disappeared, his brow furrowed in deep thought, his eyes reflecting a worry I had never seen before. He turned to me then, his voice surprisingly steady as he asked if I'd noticed anything else while Clive and I were together. Other than the wretched smell, I could only shake my head. We stood there for a moment longer, the silence of the forest pressing in on us from all sides. I could tell George wanted to say more, to explain what was happening, but he seemed lost for words. Instead, he placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder and said, "I'm sure he's okay, John. Let's head back to the station." With a hint of nervousness in his voice, George assured me that Clive was probably okay. But as we made our way back through the forest, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was very wrong. Despite George's assurances, I never saw Clive again. Whenever I asked about him, I was told he was on personal leave. But the hollow echo of those words couldn't quench the growing flame of my suspicion. His sudden disappearance was too odd, too out of character. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was awry. Weeks passed, and the scent of mystery hung heavy in the air, as pungent as the sulfuric odor that lingered in my nostrils. It was during this time that George summoned me to his office. His face was etched with a seriousness I had not seen before. The air was thick with tension as he motioned for me to sit down. "We don't usually do this with someone so young, but we have no choice," George said. His voice was a low hum, the words rolling out like thunder before a storm. My heart pounded in my chest like a wild drum, each beat echoing my anxiety. Suddenly, the shadows in the corner of the room stirred, and out stepped a man. "I believe you've met Dennis," George said, gesturing towards him. I remembered Dennis. I had met him a few weeks back, a man of few words but with a gaze as sharp as a hawk's. Dennis moved closer, the light from the window casting an eerie glow on his face. "We're going to need your help," he said, his voice gravelly. "There's things you don't understand about the forest. All you need to know is you contact me right away." He extended his hand, in it a card with his phone number. I took it, my mind racing with questions. "I don't understand what's going on," I stuttered. Dennis looked at me, his eyes piercing. "You don't need to understand, just contact me if you notice anything strange, got it?" Dennis handed me a card with his phone number, instructing me to contact him if I noticed anything strange. The meeting ended, leaving me in a whirlpool of confusion and anxiety. What was happening? What was this about? And most importantly, where was Clive? Confused and anxious, I left George's office, the card from Dennis burning a hole in my pocket. It felt like a bad joke, a prank played by the older guys on the newbie ranger. But the look in George's eyes, the seriousness in Dennis's voice, and the chilling silence that had enveloped the room told me otherwise. This was no joke. This was something far more sinister. Back at my desk, I found myself staring at the card. A plain white card with nothing but a phone number. No name, no title, nothing. Just a number. It felt like a lifeline, a beacon of hope amidst the growing darkness. But it was also a reminder of the mysteries that lurked within the forest, the unknown dangers that lay in wait. My mind wandered back to Clive. His words echoed in my head. "If you ever smell sulfur or something so strong it makes your stomach churn, then run and don't look back." Was he simply trying to scare me? Or was he warning me of something real? Something he had encountered himself? I remembered his sudden disappearance, the way his footprints had simply vanished as if he had been plucked from the earth. I remembered the fear in George's eyes, the way he had nervously dismissed Clive's absence. I remembered the sulfurous smell that had filled the air that day, and I couldn't help but feel a chilling dread creep up my spine. What was it that Clive had known? What was it that he had tried to warn me about? What was it that had happened to him? And what was it that I was now a part of? The questions kept coming, but the answers remained elusive. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the mystery only deepened. The forest continued to be a source of strange noises and odd occurrences. The sulfurous smell would sometimes waft through the air, a grim reminder of the unknown. And Clive remained missing. Dennis's card became a constant companion, a reminder of the cryptic meeting and the strange world I'd been thrust into. I found myself constantly on the lookout for anything unusual, anything out of the ordinary. I became more observant, more alert. I was no longer just a ranger. I was a guardian, a sentinel. I was a part of something bigger, something darker, and yet, despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, I found myself drawn to the forest. There was something about its mysteries, its secrets that called to me. It was like a siren song, luring me deeper into its enigmatic embrace. As I sat at my desk, I couldn't help but wonder, what really happened to Clive? Fresh-faced and eager, I stepped foot into the park ranger station for the first time. I was just an 18-year-old boy then, on the precipice of manhood. The outdoors had always been a second home to me, So when I received my acceptance letter from the Park Service, you could imagine my joy. This was before the era of emails, mind you. So the news came in the form of a crisp, formal letter in the mail. On that first day, I woke up before the crack of dawn, eager to make a good impression. I was welcomed at the station, given my induction, and handed my uniform. As a fresh recruit, I wasn't entrusted with much. I was everyone's lackey, tasked with the jobs that no one else wanted to do. A few weeks into my service, I started noticing peculiar happenings. Rangers missing their patrol times, hushed conversations held in secret corners. It felt like there were some rangers who were privy to certain information, while us younger ones were kept in the dark. I chalked it up to a chain of command, a hierarchy based on experience and need to know. How right I was, but even after 57 years of service, nothing could prepare me for the truth. Every now and then, the FBI and the Army would show up. I thought it odd, but I reasoned that they were probably conducting some training exercises. After all, what better training ground than the remote wilderness teeming with all sorts of predators? But about 2 months into the job, I had my first encounter. An encounter that would shatter my naive belief that this was just another job, that everything was as it seemed. But that, dear listeners, is a story for another time. For now, let's leave it at this. Even after 57 years of service, nothing could prepare me for the truth. 2 months in, I had my first encounter that would forever change my perception of this job. I was patrolling a nearby campsite, the sun casting long shadows between the trees, when a little girl came wandering up to me. Her hair was disheveled, clothes muddied, and her eyes held a distant look. I knelt down to her level, the scent of pine needles and damp earth filling my nostrils. "Hey there, sweetheart. Where are your parents?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She shrugged her small shoulders, her gaze never quite meeting mine. I thought maybe she had just wandered off. Surely we would soon receive a call about a missing child. So I decided to take her back to our post, make her comfortable while we waited for that inevitable call. But the call never came, and neither did her parents. As the night grew darker, I decided to probe a bit more. "Where do you live, honey? Maybe I can contact someone at your home." Her response was chilling. "I live here, silly," she said, her voice a soft whisper. I laughed nervously, trying to keep my composure. "No, you can't live here. Do you mean you're camping?" I asked, hoping for a more sensible reply. But her next words were far from sensible. They were unsettling. Her voice, previously soft and innocent, now took on a stern, deeper tone that belied her tender years. "No, I live here," she insisted, her small face serious. I felt a chill run down my spine, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Something was not right. Something was off about this child, but what was it? Her stern, deeper voice sent shivers down my spine. "No, I live here." Those words, in that voice, would echo in my mind for years to come. Little did I know then, this was just the beginning of a long, eerie journey filled with encounters that would defy logic and shake the very foundation of my understanding about the world we live in. In confusion, I picked up the phone to call the police. My heart pounded as the dial tone hummed in my ear, a stark contrast to the eerie silence in the room. "Hello, police," I began, my voice faltering slightly. "I'm a ranger at the Park Service. We have a lost child here." The operator's response was not what I expected. "Oh, you'll need to speak with Dennis. He's your handler." I was taken aback. "My what? Handler?" The word itself carried a weight that made my stomach churn. Before I could process what was happening, I was put through to Dennis. He had a deep, gravelly voice, like a man who had seen too many winters. I quickly explained the situation, my words tumbling out in a rush. His response sent a chill down my spine. "Don't let her leave." His voice was urgent, almost desperate. "Whatever happens, don't let it leave." "It?" I echoed, my mind racing. What did he mean, it? Was he referring to the little girl? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Dennis sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "Just keep an eye on her. We'll have someone there soon to assist you." I agreed, though I felt a knot of unease in my stomach. "Okay, sure," I said, then hung up the phone. The little girl was watching me, her eyes wide and innocent. "Who was that?" she asked. "Was that my mommy?" I shook my head, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, sweetheart, we can't find her. A police officer named Dennis, or one of his friends, will be coming to take you home." Her reaction was immediate and terrifying. A demonic scream tore from her throat as she shrieked, "No, they won't get me!" And then she was gone, disappearing into the forest. I was left standing alone, the echoes of her scream lingering in the air. The words, "Don't let it leave," echoed in my mind. In the blink of an eye, the little girl was gone. One moment she stood there, all innocence and curiosity. The next she was a blur, darting away with a speed that was anything but childlike. Her demonic scream still echoed in my ears, a chilling reminder of the sudden transformation I had just witnessed. The forest, usually a place of tranquility and beauty, had become a lurking, ominous entity. It swallowed her whole, concealing her within its dense undergrowth. I could hear the rustling of leaves, the snapping of twigs, but no human sound. No cries, no laughter, just the haunting silence of the wilderness. I found myself rooted to the spot, my mind a whirl of confusion and fear. The words of the FBI agent Dennis echoed in my head, "Don't let it leave." But what did he mean by it? The little girl or something far more sinister? The more I thought about it, the more terrified I became. The little girl's words, her sudden change, it was all too strange, too horrifying. I tried to chase after her, to follow the path she had taken, but it was like chasing a ghost. She was there one moment, and then she was not. I could feel the cold dread settling in. The realization that I was dealing with something far more complex and terrifying than a simple missing child. The forest seemed to close in on me, its shadows deepening, its silence growing heavier. I could feel the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes upon me, watching, waiting. I could almost hear the whispers of the trees, their ancient secrets rustling in the wind. I retreated, my heart pounding in my chest, my skin prickling with fear. I didn't know what was happening, what was lurking in the shadows, but I knew one thing for certain. I was out of my depth, and this was only the beginning. She disappeared into the woods, leaving me standing there, alone and terrified. When Agent Dennis arrived, his relief at the girl's disappearance only added to my confusion. The air was thick with an unspoken tension as the FBI agent assessed the situation. His eyes darted around, taking in the empty wilderness that had swallowed the little girl. The loss of a child would usually incite panic, but Dennis seemed oddly at ease. His brow was not furrowed with worry, but rather, it relaxed, a sigh of relief escaping him. Dennis was a man of few words, but the words he did share carried weight. He was not one to waste his breath on idle chatter, so when he spoke, you listened, and his words always left an impression. He turned to me, his gaze piercing through the veil of my naivety. He studied me for what felt like an eternity before finally speaking. His voice was calm and composed, yet it echoed an undercurrent of chilling warning. "If you stick around, kid, you'll find out one day what's really going on." His words hung in the air, a foreboding prophecy that sent shivers down my spine. The implications of his statement left me with more questions than answers. What was I not seeing? What was hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly peaceful park? What was the truth that I was yet to uncover? Dennis didn't elaborate further. Instead, he turned his back to me and walked away, leaving me standing alone in the chilling silence of the wilderness. His cryptic words echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of the unknown I was yet to face. In that moment, I understood that my journey with the Park Service was not going to be a simple one. There were dark secrets buried within the heart of these woods, secrets that were far beyond my comprehension. But as Dennis's words echoed in my mind, I realized that I was destined to uncover them. He left me with his cryptic words, "If you stick around, kid, you'll find out one day what's really going on." Little did I know how true they would turn out to be. In the summer of 1967, not long after my 19th birthday, I was patrolling the lakes. The day was as typical as any other summer day. The lakes were teeming with life, laughter echoed through the air, and the splashing of water created a rhythm that underscored the cheeriness of the season. But then, something unusual happened. A young bear emerged from the woods, its innocent eyes scanning the bustling scene with curiosity. I was taken aback. It was unusual for a bear, especially a young one, to venture so close to the crowd. I figured the mother must be near, and not wanting to cross paths with the protective mama bear, I decided to retreat. But as I turned to leave, my path was blocked by a sight that sent chills down my spine. The mother bear's body lay lifeless on the forest floor, brutally torn apart by something far stronger and larger than her. A trail of tracks led away from the scene, disappearing into the lake. The air grew heavy with dread, and I was overcome with a feeling I couldn't shake off. Something wasn't right. I followed the tracks, my heart pounding in my chest as I scanned the waters, but there was nothing. The lake was calm, as if untouched by the horror that lurked nearby. I tried to convince myself that it was just an old kill, but the feeling of unease refused to subside. Deciding to trust my gut, I resolved to explore the surroundings of the lake. Maybe I would find more tracks leading away from the water. Maybe I would find whatever had caused this tragedy. So, with a heavy heart and the lingering feeling of dread, I began my journey around the lake. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that danced eerily on the water's surface. The laughter and splashing had died down, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to echo my unease. I didn't know what I would find, or what was yet to come, but I knew I had to keep going. Since I couldn't shake this feeling of dread, I started to make my way round the lake to the other side. As I made my way round, I came across a husband looking for his wife. They were newlyweds, fresh off the vows and onto a honeymoon adventure in the mountains. But joy had turned to anxiety as Brian, the husband, searched desperately for his wife. She'd been right beside him in the lake, then, in the blink of an eye, she was gone. Brian's eyes were a cocktail of fear and confusion. He was struggling to comprehend her sudden disappearance. He explained they had been swimming together when he decided to take a break and grab a beer. When he turned back, his wife had vanished. He'd assumed she'd swum out of his line of sight, or perhaps had also stepped out of the water. But as time passed and there was no sign of her, panic had set in. I could see the worry etched into his face. I reassured him, saying I was sure she was fine, but I'd help him look. Together we combed the lakeside, scanning the waters and the surrounding area. But there was nothing, no sign of the missing wife. A chilling thought crept into my mind, a possibility I hadn't considered. Could she have drowned? Then a memory resurfaced. The tracks. Those strange, unidentifiable tracks I'd seen earlier. A shiver of dread ran down my spine. Could there be a connection? I led Brian to where I had intended to go before our paths crossed. There we found more tracks, these ones leading into the forest. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had to call this in. I told Brian to stay put, to wait there just in case she came back. He agreed, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. As I walked away, I could hear the echo of Brian's pacing, the crunching of leaves under his feet, the shaky breaths he took. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The missing wife, the destroyed bear, the strange tracks, they all added up to a terrifying conclusion that I wasn't ready to face. I told the husband I was going to have to call this in and that he should stay here just in case she comes back. I made the call to Dennis, our FBI handler, and told him of the situation. I began, my voice shaking with a blend of fear and adrenaline. Dennis, we have a situation at the lake. A woman is missing, and there are odd tracks. I paused, unsure of how to describe the strange footprints I had discovered. Dennis, ever the calm professional, responded with a steady voice. Ranger, do you have any idea of what might have caused those tracks? His question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Was it a bear, a mountain lion, or something else entirely? I can't say for sure, Dennis, I admitted, the dread in my stomach intensifying. But I found a bear, a mother. She was torn apart. And the track, they led to and from the lake. Silence echoed on the other end of the line, then in a lower tone than before, Dennis gave his instructions. Follow the tracks, Ranger, but be careful. If you encounter anything, don't... His voice suddenly cut off, leaving me in a chilling silence. I tried calling his name, but the line was dead. A cold wave of dread washed over me. The sudden cutoff of the call was disconcerting, but I had a job to do. A woman was missing, and these tracks were the only lead we had. I had to follow them no matter the risk. I turned to Brian, the worried husband. Stay here, Brian, I instructed. I'm going to follow these tracks. If your wife comes back, you need to be here. He nodded, his face pale and drawn. With a deep breath, I turned my gaze to the forest. The tracks led deep into the undergrowth, disappearing into the shadowy depths. But it was my only lead, my only hope to find the missing woman. I followed the tracks into the forest, fighting through the thick bushes and up steep terrain. The words echoed in my mind as I ventured into the unknown, my heart pounding in my chest. The forest seemed to close in around me, the silence broken only by the crunch of my boots on the forest floor. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I had to press on. I had to find her. Eventually I got to a river where the tracks stopped. I assumed whatever it was, used the river to mask its tracks. The river, a winding ribbon of water, was my only guide now. I followed the current, my heart pounding with every step. The trees loomed above me, their branches reaching out as if they were trying to pull me into their dark embrace. The air was humid and heavy, filled with the smell of wet earth and the distant roar of the waterfall. As I pushed through the underbrush, the sound of rushing water grew louder. The river led me to a clearing where the waterfall cascaded down, a stunning spectacle of nature's raw power. Nestled at the base of the waterfall, I spotted the wife. Her clothes were torn and she was shivering, but she was alive. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. She was trembling, her eyes wide with fear. As I approached her, she recoiled, but soon recognized me as a familiar face. She clung to me, her words tumbling out in a rush. She spoke of a massive creature, a man but not quite a man, covered in thick hair from head to toe. This beast had snatched her from the lake, she explained, and carried her up to this secluded spot. The description sent a chill down my spine. It was eerily similar to the legends of the Sasquatch that the locals would whisper about around campfires. I couldn't believe it, yet the fear in her eyes was real. She warned me that it would be back soon. She thinks it went to get her some food. Her voice was barely a whisper, her words echoing in my mind. The waterfall roared in the background, a constant reminder of the isolation of our location. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. The forest was eerily silent, as if all creatures were holding their breath, waiting for the return of the beast. The feeling of dread was back, stronger than ever. I knew we weren't alone. We had to get out of there, and fast. When I turned around, that's when I saw it. A hulking figure standing at least 8 feet tall, shrouded in the twilight of the forest. Its form was that of a man, yet it was covered head to toe in coarse, dark hair. Its eyes sparkled with an eerie intelligence that sent shivers down my spine. The air around us seemed to thicken, filled with a primal fear that resonated within my very core. Its massive chest heaved with each breath it took, and I could see the muscles rippling beneath the mat of hair. Its long arms ended in hands that were more akin to claws, tipped with wickedly sharp nails. Its face, partially obscured by the hair, bore an expression of curiosity mixed with aggression. A low growl rumbled from its throat, echoing through the silent forest and causing the hairs at the back of my neck to stand on end. Before I could react, it lunged at me. Its movements were a blur, a terrifying display of speed and power that defied its massive size. I felt the air being pushed out of my lungs as it collided with me, its claws digging into my flesh. The world spun around me, and I could feel the ground disappearing beneath my feet as I was tossed aside like a rag doll. The last thing I remembered was the beast's face, its eyes boring into mine, filled with an uncanny intelligence that belied its monstrous appearance. Then everything went dark. The sounds of the forest, the rushing of the river nearby, the calls of the distant birds all faded away into silence. I don't know how long I was out, or what happened after that. Did the beast leave, or did it stay, watching over me as I lay unconscious on the forest floor? I don't know. The only thing I knew for sure was the fear, the primal, instinctive fear that the sight of the beast had instilled in me. All I remember next is waking up in the forest alone. On a biting winter night in the year 1967, the park's silence was shattered by the clamor of some hunters. Our tale begins on a frosty evening as I, a retired park ranger named John, trudged through the park, establishing winter boundaries. Fatigue was my unwelcome companion, an inevitable outcome of winter's limited staffing. Yet, the quiet serenity of the park, bathed in a cloak of white, made it all worthwhile. An unexpected crackle of the radio interrupted my musings, a complaint about noisy hunters lodged in a log cabin. Hunters, a rowdy bunch, but this was unusual even for them. So I began my journey towards the site, each step a battle against the snow's resistance, the cold air nipping at my skin. As I neared, the faint uproar of the hunters wafted through the winter air. I braced myself, anticipating a group of intoxicated men firing rifles into the wilderness in their merry revelry. But the scene that awaited me was far from my expectations. The hunters were not in high spirits, but rather seemed disoriented, their eyes scanning the area in disquiet. After a brief exchange, it was clear they were neither drunk nor jubilant. Their sobriety was not the product of restraint, but of genuine concern. Their worry centered around one of their friends, Frank, who was missing. Frank, it seemed, had ventured out into the forest for a moment of solitude, only to be drawn further in by an unknown allure. His friends, initially unconcerned given Frank's familiarity with the forest and his hunting prowess, grew anxious as time passed. They reported hearing strange noises, and sensing movement in the forest earlier, but had dismissed it as a bear or a deer. But Frank's disappearance had now cast a shadow of doubt over their assumptions. Their concern was directed towards one of their friends, Frank, who had run into the forest chasing after an unknown entity. A cold winter night had suddenly turned into a chilling mystery, the first chapter of an eerie tale that was yet to unfold. With the hunter's account of Frank's sudden disappearance, the seriousness of the situation dawned upon us. The idea of Frank, an experienced hunter, lost in the chilling winter night, was a disquieting thought. We were a resolute group, determined to find our friend. Our journey into the heart of the forest was a silent one, punctuated only by the crunch of our boots on the fresh snow. We followed Frank's tracks, a trail of solitary footprints that led us deeper into the woods. The absence of any other animal tracks struck us as peculiar. It was as if the forest had swallowed up all its inhabitants, leaving behind an eerie silence. The trail led us to a clearing, a scene that sent chills down our spines. There were signs of a struggle. Blood speckled the snow, and the ground beneath had been disturbed, revealing the dark earth. The sight was enough to freeze the blood in our veins. We searched for signs of what animal could have caused this, but found no tracks, no prints, nothing but the haunting stillness of the forest. Uncertainty hung heavy in the cold air as we decided to split up, hoping to cover more ground. I paired up with one of the hunters, and we set off straight ahead, leaving the others to explore the left and right flanks of the clearing. As we ventured further into the heart of the forest, an unsettling feeling washed over us. It felt as though eyes were watching us from the shadows. The silence was deafening, swallowing even the sound of our own breaths. The crunching snow under our feet seemed to disappear into the void of the night. Suddenly, a shadowy figure darted across our path in the distance. We approached the area, but it was long gone. All that remained were peculiar holes in the ground, deep and thick, as if a bear had been digging, but on its hind legs. The hunter accompanying me pointed towards the darkness. That's when we saw it, a pair of glowing eyes staring back at us from the inky blackness. We raised our rifles, but as quickly as they appeared, they vanished. As we ventured deeper into the forest, an eerie feeling of being watched settled upon us. The forest silence was unsettling, and the sight of a shadowy figure crawling in the distance did nothing to ease our nerves. The figure was elusive, disappearing as we approached, leaving us in the heart of the woods, with only our torchlight to guide us. The once comforting familiarity of the forest had turned into a maze of shadows and strange noises. In the spot where we had seen the figure, we found a series of peculiar holes in the ground. They were not like the usual markings of wildlife we were accustomed to seeing. These were deep, as if they had been dug by a creature with significant strength. The holes were about 2.5 pens in length, a detail that added to the growing sense of unease. They were oddly thick too, as if made by a bear standing on its claws. I couldn't shake off the feeling that whatever had created these holes was not an animal we were familiar with. As we examined the area, a chill ran down my spine. The forest, which had been eerily quiet, seemed to hum with an unseen presence. The hairs at the back of my neck stood on end, a primal instinct alerting me to a potential threat. The hunter accompanying me seemed to sense it too. His eyes darted around the gloomy forest, his grip tightening on his rifle. Suddenly he tapped my shoulder and pointed toward the darkness. My heart pounded in my chest as I followed his gaze. There, in the pitch black of the forest, a pair of bright eyes stared back at us. They were unlike any animal eyes I had seen before, glowing menacingly in the dark. We raised our rifles instinctively, but just as quickly as they had appeared, they vanished. Just as we were trying to comprehend the situation, the hunter pointed towards the darkness, where a pair of bright eyes stared back at us. Before we could even raise our rifles, the bright eyes had disappeared, replaced by a familiar figure rushing out of the forest. It was Frank, his face flushed and eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. His clothes were torn and dirty, but he seemed unharmed, physically at least. "Where did it go?" he demanded, panting heavily from the exertion. Frank was a seasoned hunter, yet the urgency in his voice was unmistakable. He was not talking about a bear or a deer, but something he had never encountered before. We tried to calm him down, urging him to take a moment and breathe. But Frank was restless. His eyes darted around the forest, his fingers twitching near the trigger of his rifle. He was determined to find the creature, whatever it was. We didn't know what he had seen, but we knew it was something beyond our comprehension, something that had left Frank, an experienced hunter, rattled and eager to chase. But the dark forest was not a place to satisfy curiosity, especially not on this cold, eerie night. We told Frank we should head back, that it was dangerous to be out in the woods at this time. He was reluctant, his gaze still fixed on the shadowy trees. But eventually, he gave in. Maybe it was the cold seeping into his bones, or perhaps the realization that he was not prepared for whatever lived in the depths of the forest. As we made our way back to the cabin, the forest seemed even more silent than before. Each crunching step in the snow echoed around us, and we couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. But we pressed on, a group of hunters turned prey in the chilling darkness. Finally, the cabin's lights were in sight, a beacon of safety in the enigmatic wilderness. We didn't linger in the forest, didn't dare to look back at the unknown entity that lurked in its depths. We left the forest that night with more questions than answers, wondering about the unknown entity that lurked in its depths. As we retreated to the safety of our cabins, Frank's story unfolded, raising more questions about the unknown creature. Frank recounted how he had glimpsed a large, shadowy figure moving in the forest. He had pursued it, thinking it was a bear or deer. However, upon closer inspection, the creature was unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was the strange creature that he had chased into the heart of the forest. The creature was elusive, leaving behind only the faintest trace of its presence. The peculiar holes in the ground, the depth of which was about 2.5 pins, were unlike any animal markings we'd seen before. They were thick, as if made by a creature of considerable weight. Yet there were no tracks leading to or from them. Frank described a sudden, eerie silence that had fallen over the forest, the same silence I had experienced. The feeling of being watched was a sensation we both couldn't shake off. We were being observed by something or someone lurking in the shadows. And then there were the eyes. Bright glowing orbs that pierced the darkness, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. Their glow was not that of a predator's eyes, but something altogether different. Something that sent a shiver down our spines and made our blood run cold. We combed the area for any other signs of that creature, but found nothing. The forest had swallowed up the evidence, leaving behind only the chilling memory of our encounter. We were left with an unresolved mystery, a question that echoed in our minds. What was this creature that had stalked us in the forest? Frank was unharmed, but his experience had changed him. He was quieter, more reserved. He rarely ventured into the woods after that night. The forest, once a place of beauty and tranquility, had become a source of fear and uncertainty. The mystery of what Frank chased that winter night remains unresolved, a chilling reminder of the unknown entities that could be lurking in the depths of the forest. The clock had just struck midnight when a man, out of breath and panic-stricken, burst into the ranger station. His eyes were wild, sweat pouring down his face as he gasped out a tale that made my blood run cold. He claimed a monster, a shadow in the dark, had attacked his friends at their campsite. The man was beside himself with terror, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush. He described the creature as a looming specter, a darkness that moved and breathed, creeping up on their unsuspecting group before launching its attack. The image he painted was one of stark horror, a nightmare brought to life in the peaceful tranquility of the woods. Naturally, skepticism was my initial reaction. Monsters aren't real, I thought, but the fear in his eyes, the raw panic in his voice, it was all too real. I couldn't ignore his plea for help. I asked him to point out their campsite on the map. My heart pounded in my chest as I studied the trails, plotting the quickest route. Every second mattered. If his story was true, his friends were in danger, and I was their only hope. Despite the fear gnawing at my gut, I knew I had to investigate. I was a ranger, after all. It was my duty to protect the park and its visitors, even if it meant facing the unknown. So, with a map in hand and a sense of dread in my chest, I headed out into the dark. The forest was eerily silent, the usual nocturnal sounds swallowed by an ominous quiet. The only sound was the pounding of my heart and the crunch of leaves beneath my feet. As I made my way towards the campsite, I couldn't help but wonder what I would find there. Would I come face to face with the monster the man had described? Or was it all just a terrifying tale spun by a scared and confused camper? Only time would tell. One thing was for sure, though. That night was a night I would never forget. The campsite was a scene straight out of a nightmare. The serenity of the forest had been brutally shattered. The once welcoming campsite was now a canvas of carnage and chaos. Tents torn apart, belongings scattered haphazardly, and the horrifying sight of body parts strewn around like discarded playthings. Blood painted the scene with a grotesque brush, a macabre masterpiece that left me frozen in shock. Looking up, a mangled torso hung from a tree, dangling like a grotesque Christmas ornament. My gut twisted and turned, an ominous feeling creeping up my spine. The creature, it was still here. I could feel its presence, a predator, lurking in the shadows, waiting, watching. The air turned heavy, carrying with it a smell that seized my senses. It was a stench of rotting flesh, a nauseating perfume of death that seemed to emanate from the heart of the forest. Then, I saw it. A dark figure like a phantom moved in the pitch-black canvas of the forest. Its form was barely discernible, a shadowy silhouette against the moonlit backdrop. But as it stepped into the silvery glow of the moon, my heart pounded in my chest like a warning drum. What I saw was no ordinary beast. An emaciated figure towered before me, its ash-colored flesh stretched tight over skeletal frame. Sparse patches of fur clung to its body, a grotesque parody of the creature it once was. Standing at a staggering 15 feet, it was an imposing figure, its sunken eyes glowing in the darkness, yellowed fangs and claws gleaming menacingly. Its lips, or what used to be lips, were gnawed off, revealing a permanent, horrific grin. Antlers sprouted from its head, completing the nightmarish picture. My stomach churned, heaving under the weight of the horror before me. As the figure moved into the moonlight, I saw a sight that turned my blood to ice. It was a creature from a horror story, a Wendigo, and it was coming closer. Its towering figure was a grotesque parody of a human, with ashen skin stretched thin over protruding bones. It moved on all fours, a monstrous silhouette against the moonlit forest. Its eyes glowed with a predatory light, and its lips, or what remained of them, pulled back to reveal yellowed fangs. This was the Wendigo from the legends of old, a beast known for its insatiable hunger for human flesh. Its elongated limbs, tipped with razor-sharp claws, gave it an eerie, spider-like movement. The air around it was heavy with the stench of decay, a nauseating reminder of its cannibalistic nature. Despite the overwhelming fear, I found myself studying the beast. Its fur was sparse, appearing in patches over its skeletal frame. Antlers sprouted from its head, adding to its height and making it appear even more formidable. The sight of it sent a chill down my spine, a terror deeper than anything I had ever experienced. As it approached, I could hear the crunch of leaves under its weight, the rustle of the undergrowth as it moved. It was a symphony of terror, every sound echoing the impending doom. I knew the legends well enough to understand that the Wendigo possessed superior senses, strength, and speed. It was a predator, and I was its prey. I felt a cold shiver of resignation. I was no match for this beast. The foul odor it emitted was suffocating, making my eyes water and my lungs burn. As its jaws opened wide, revealing a row of sharp yellow teeth, I prepared myself for the inevitable. But just as I accepted my fate, the silence was shattered. The quiet of the night erupted into chaos as a gunshot rang out. The Wendigo, startled, darted off into the darkness, leaving me in a state of shock and relief. Just as I braced myself for the end, the silence of the night shattered with the sound of a gunshot. A man in an army uniform stood nearby, rifle smoking, as the Wendigo fled into the forest. The sudden crack of the gunshot had echoed through the dense woodland, shattering the eerie silence. The beast, caught off guard, darted away, disappearing once more into the cloak of darkness. The man, a soldier by the looks of his uniform, quickly moved to my side, his eyes scanning the area with an experienced gaze. "Here," he said, thrusting a rifle into my hands. His voice was firm, commanding. "We've got to follow it, now!" I nodded, swallowing hard as I felt the cold metal of the gun against my skin. The soldier, who introduced himself as John, led the way, his footsteps sure and steady. We pushed through the undergrowth, our hearts pounding in time with the distant, retreating footsteps of the Wendigo. But the creature was fast, unnaturally so, and it vanished into the darkness, leaving us standing alone in the heart of the forest. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long, ghostly shadows that seemed to dance and sway with every rustle of the leaves. John let out a frustrated hiss, slamming his rifle down onto the ground. The sound echoed ominously, a stark reminder of our failure. We had lost the Wendigo, and with it, our chance to end the nightmare. "Damn it," John muttered, running a hand through his hair. He looked back at me, his gaze hardened by the night's events. "We'll need to track it back to its lair, but you need to get back. It's not safe here." I could see the truth in his eyes, feel the weight of his words. This was a fight far beyond my capabilities, a fight against a beast of legends. And so, despite the adrenaline still coursing through my veins, I nodded, turning to make my way back to the safety of the ranger station. I watched as the soldier, John, slammed his rifle down in frustration. The Wendigo vanished into the night. I could see the grim determination on John's face as he declared he must track the Wendigo alone. His resolve was as sharp as the winter air cutting through the forest, and I could feel the urgency of his mission. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a long, jagged scratch on his arm. "If I don't kill it," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper, "I'll turn into one of them." The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. The Wendigo wasn't just a monster, it was a curse, a fate worse than death. It was the transformation of man into a creature of nightmares, a process that had already begun in John. It was a tale spun around campfires, a legend I had dismissed as mere folklore until this night. But now the truth was as clear as the moonlight filtering through the trees. The fear that had been simmering within me now erupted, filling me with a cold dread. I was no soldier, no hero ready to face a mythical beast. I was a park ranger, a protector of nature, not a warrior against supernatural forces. John must have seen the terror in my eyes, for he didn't ask me to join him. Instead, he handed me a spare rifle, his fingers briefly brushing against mine. "Go back to the station," he ordered, his voice firm yet compassionate. "Stay safe." With that, he turned and disappeared into the night, swallowed by the shadows as he ventured deeper into the forest. I stood there for a moment, caught between my duty and my fear, between the man who needed my help and the monster that awaited us. But fear won. I was no match for the Wendigo. I was no match for the horror that this night had become. With a heavy heart and a chilling fear, I fled back to the safety of the ranger station, leaving John and the beast behind in the dark forest. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to encounter a Bigfoot? That's a question I, John, a retired park ranger, never thought I'd seriously contemplate. One evening, as the sun began to set and the forest was bathed in a soft twilight, I was enjoying a solitary stroll along one of the park's serpentine trails. The tranquility of the setting was abruptly shattered by a gunshot that echoed ominously through the dense forest. The sound was far too close for comfort, seemingly originating from within the boundaries of the no-hunting zone. We had these boundaries in place to protect the public from any potential harm. Hunters, both seasoned and rookies, were strictly forbidden from these areas, but that gunshot, it was unmistakably close. With years of experience under my belt, I had developed a keen sense of direction. Despite the way sound bounced around in the forest, distorting its origin, I was confident I could locate the source. I began to make my way towards it, the adrenaline pumping through my veins, my heart pounding in my chest. As I got closer to the source of the gunshot, another shot rang out, followed by a triumphant shout. My heart sank as I realized the hunter might have actually hit something. I hurried towards the sound, waving my arms above my head, shouting for them to stop. And there he was, a rugged hunter with a devil-may-care attitude, rifle in hand, a smug grin plastered on his face. He was the embodiment of reckless audacity. I was about to reprimand him for his blatant disregard for the park's rules when he cut me off with an announcement that sent chills down my spine. He proudly claimed to have shot a Bigfoot. This was an unexpected encounter indeed. A hunter, a gunshot, and a supposed Bigfoot. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Little did I know, the night was far from over and the real horror was yet to unfold. At first, I thought it was just another false claim. That's what I usually tell myself when hunters like Bill insist they've shot something extraordinary. But as we journeyed towards the ridge where he claimed to have downed the mythical Bigfoot, I couldn't shake off a sense of unease. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that danced with the rustling leaves. Bill was a few steps ahead, leading the way with an excitement that was contagious, yet troubling. The forest was eerily quiet. The only sound was the crunching of leaves beneath our boots and the occasional hoot of an owl. We arrived at a clearing, and there it was, a large, hairy figure sprawled on the ground. It was an image that would forever be etched in my mind. The sight of the beast was surreal, its massive form covered in thick, matted fur. Bill was ecstatic, pumping his fists in the air, his face illuminated with a triumphant grin. He was convinced he had just made history, that his name would be etched into the annals of hunting lore. But as I stood there staring at the lifeless creature, a sense of dread washed over me. This was not a trophy, it was a tragedy. I felt a deep sorrow for the creature that lay before us. It was an animal that had been living quietly in its natural habitat, only to be brought down by a bullet. Bill's cheers echoed through the forest, shattering the silence that had once prevailed. His joy was misplaced, his celebration a mockery of the life that had been lost. I stood there, a silent spectator to this horrifying spectacle, a knot forming in my stomach. Just as I was about to voice my concerns, the tranquility of the forest was once again disrupted. This time it wasn't a gunshot, but the frantic rustling of leaves. A man burst through the bushes, gasping for breath, his face a mask of sheer panic. His appearance was as unexpected as the earlier gunshot, and it brought with it a new twist to our already bewildering situation. But then, amidst all the celebration, a man burst through the bushes. The newcomer, Jamie, had a look of terror on his face. He was panting, his eyes darting wildly between us and the fallen figure in the dirt. He held a camera, its red recording light still blinking. "You killed Chris!" he cried out, pointing an accusing finger at the hunter. Jamie began to explain, his words stumbling over each other in his haste. He and Chris, he said, were amateur filmmakers. They had been working on a YouTube project, a mockumentary about Bigfoot sightings in the area. Chris had been in a suit playing the part of the legendary beast. Jamie had been filming from a distance when he heard the shots. The hunter, Bill, his face pale, shook his head in disbelief. "No," he said, "I saw... it was..." He trailed off, unable to finish his sentence, his eyes locked on the figure on the ground. We all turned to look. The creature lay still, its massive, hairy form sprawled out in the dirt. The face looked strange. The eyes were hollow, empty sockets, the mouth a gaping hole. It didn't look quite right. Together we approached the body. Bill bent down and with a trembling hand reached out to touch the creature's face. As his fingers brushed against the skin, it moved. It was a mask. We all held our breath as he slowly pulled it off, revealing the face underneath. There in the dirt lay Chris. His eyes were closed, his face pale. He looked so human. Not a mythical creature, not a beast, but a man. A man who had been playing a part. A man who had been mistaken for a legend. The hunter's elation, his triumph, turned to horror. His trophy was not a creature of legend, but a man he had killed. I turned to him, my voice heavy with sorrow and reproach. "You were right, Bill," I said. "You will be famous, but not for bagging a Bigfoot." In that moment, it was clear that the hunter's fame would be his downfall. The hunter's triumph quickly turned into a nightmare. I told Bill he was under citizen's arrest and we needed to head back to the ranger station immediately. His face paled. The weight of his actions had finally sunk in. All thoughts of fame and fortune had evaporated, replaced with the dread of the consequences of his reckless actions. As we made the trek back to the station, I couldn't help but reflect on the situation. Here we were, two men in the middle of nowhere, bound together by a tragic accident. The silence was heavy, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves underfoot. Upon reaching the station, I informed my fellow rangers of the situation. The disbelief on their faces mirrored my own when I first heard Bill's story. We contacted the police immediately. The law would have to decide Bill's fate. As we waited for the authorities to arrive, my thoughts turned to the Bigfoot suit. It was eerily realistic, even up close. The hairs were coarse and thick, the mask so well crafted it fooled a seasoned hunter. I couldn't help but wonder why someone would engage in such a dangerous stunt. It was a question that would haunt me for days to come. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the recklessness of the stunt. The park was a place of peace, a sanctuary for people and animals alike. The idea that someone would deliberately endanger that peace was infuriating. But more than that, it was saddening. This was a tragic accident that could have been easily avoided. As the police arrived and took Bill into custody, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. Not for myself, but for the park. It was a tragic day, but it served as a stark reminder of the thin line between curiosity and danger. In the end, it was a lesson learned the hard way. A reminder that in our pursuit of the unknown, we must never forget the value of life and the consequences of our actions. It was a tragic day, a day that reminded us all of the thin line between curiosity and danger. The events of that day left a permanent mark on everyone involved. The quiet tranquility of the park was shattered, replaced with a somber silence that hung heavily in the air. We, the park rangers, were left grappling with the realization of how quickly a peaceful day can turn into a nightmare. For the public, it was a horrifying story that spread like wildfire, a chilling reminder of the potential dangers lurking in the wilderness. The park, once a haven for nature lovers, was now tainted with the memory of a tragic incident. Visitors were more cautious, their laughter a little quieter, their gazes a little warier. Yet, it was also a testament to the resilience of humanity as people continued to visit, choosing to not let fear dictate their lives. This incident was a wake-up call for us rangers. We had always prioritized safety, but this event showed us that we needed to do more. We increased our patrols, made sure that our no-hunting zones were more clearly marked, and started public awareness campaigns. We wanted to ensure that such a tragedy would never repeat itself. The death of Chris was a harsh lesson for all. It highlighted the importance of being aware of our surroundings, of understanding the potential risks involved in our actions. His death was a result of a reckless act, a pursuit of fame that disregarded the potential dangers. But it was also a result of a prank gone horribly wrong. It served as a reminder that pranks, while seemingly harmless, can have dire consequences if not thought through. The incident also sparked a debate about the ethics of hunting. It forced us to question whether the thrill of the hunt was worth the potential risks. It made us reconsider our policies and regulations and ponder on how we could better balance the interests of hunters with the safety of the public and wildlife. It was a harsh reminder that in the pursuit of fame or thrill, one must not disregard the potential dangers and consequences. In the end, we all carried the weight of that day, a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of responsible choices. I was a seasoned park ranger, unafraid of the forest and its secrets. My name is John, and I've spent a lifetime patrolling the dense, ancient woods of Pine Haven. It's a place of breathtaking beauty, cloaked in layers of mystery. The locals whisper about it being haunted, spinning tales of odd happenings and unexplained disappearances that date back generations. But me? I've always been a man of science, a man of reason. I've always believed there's a logical explanation for everything, even the bizarre. Then came that fateful summer evening. A call from the park's headquarters broke the tranquil silence of my lodge. A group of hikers had vanished into the belly of Pine Haven, and I was tasked with leading the search and rescue mission. A storm was brewing, threatening to unleash its fury on the forest. Time was of the essence. I quickly gathered a team of seasoned rangers, each armed with flashlights and backpacks, and we plunged into the thick wilderness. As we delved deeper into the forest, it morphed into a formidable labyrinth of towering trees and tangled underbrush. The dense canopy overhead swallowed the sun, casting the forest floor into an eerie twilight. I've known these woods like the back of my hand for years, but that night even I couldn't shake off an unsettling sense of unease. I brushed it off as nerves, a natural reaction to the looming storm. As the hours rolled by, the drizzle turned into a steady downpour. Our search had hit a dead end, the hiker's track seemingly vanishing into thin air. Exhaustion was beginning to creep in, and we decided to set up camp for the night. We huddled around a small fire, seeking solace from the damp and the cold. But despite our efforts, the forest seemed to tighten its grip around us, the shadows growing darker and more oppressive. The forest seemed different that night, but I dismissed it as nerves. The forest was a wall of trees and underbrush, blocking out the sun. As we ventured deeper, the woods swallowed us whole, casting us into a world of perpetual twilight. Our flashlights cut through the gloom, illuminating the path ahead. There was an odd chill in the air, a sense of unease that seemed to seep from the very soil beneath our feet. The forest, usually a place of beauty and tranquility, felt strange, almost alien. It was as if the trees themselves were watching us, their silent sentinels whispering secrets we couldn't understand. The further we ventured, the stronger this feeling became. I tried to shake it off, attributing it to the stress of our mission and the impending storm. Our search for the missing hikers led us through dense undergrowth and over treacherous terrain. Their tracks, initially clear and distinct, started to fade. It was as if they had vanished into the ether. Despite our best efforts, we could find no trace of them. The forest had swallowed their tracks, leaving us with a mystery that seemed to deepen with each passing hour. As night fell, the forest became a world of shadows and whispers. The rain had begun to fall, a steady drizzle that soaked us to the bone. We decided to make camp to rest and regroup. We huddled around a small fire, its flickering light pushing back the oppressive darkness. The warmth was a small comfort against the cold, damp forest. We shared stories and laughter, trying to keep the spirits high. But the forest around us seemed to grow quieter, the shadows deeper. It was as if it was holding its breath, waiting for something. An unspoken tension hung in the air, a sense of anticipation that made my skin crawl. We bedded down for the night, the fire casting long, dancing shadows across our makeshift camp. The forest was a silent observer, his dark canopy stretching out above us like a velvet shroud. As sleep claimed us, the last thing I remember was the soft patter of rain on the leaves and the feeling of being watched. The forest seemed to close in around us, the shadows growing darker. I woke to a soft whispering sound. The trees seemed to be speaking. The night was thick with silence, every rustle of leaves and creak of branches amplified in the quiet. My eyes scanned the darkness, but my team was still huddled in their sleeping bags, oblivious to the whispering that echoed softly through the woods. The sound wasn't menacing, but it was eerie, like an old lullaby sung in a language long forgotten. I rose, my boots crunching on the wet fallen leaves. The whispering seemed to grow louder, a sweet, haunting melody that tugged at my curiosity. I followed the sound, stepping carefully through the underbrush, my flashlight casting long shadows between the trees. With every step, the whispering grew clearer, pulling me deeper into the heart of the forest. The forest was alive with whispers, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. The whispering was no longer just a sound, it was a presence, a being that existed in the space between the trees. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I pressed on, drawn by the promise of an unseen mystery. As I ventured further, the whispering seemed to lead me, guiding me through the dense foliage. My heart pounded in my chest, a wild rhythm that matched the whispering that filled the air. It was as if the forest was revealing its secrets to me, whispering tales of its ancient past and the countless souls that had wandered its paths. Suddenly, the whispering stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. I found myself in a small clearing, the moonlight casting an ethereal glow on the damp forest floor. In the clearing stood a figure, a woman, her clothes torn and her face streaked with dirt. Her eyes were wild, filled with a fear that echoed the terror of the whispering forest. She extended a shaky hand towards me, her voice barely more than a whisper as she pleaded, "Help me!" In that moment, I knew I had stumbled upon a mystery that the whispering forest had kept hidden for far too long. She was in tattered clothes, her eyes filled with fear. This was how I first saw the lone hiker, standing in the moonlit clearing of the forest. Her voice trembled as she whispered of a tale that chilled the blood in my veins, a tale of her friends being taken in the heart of the ancient, sprawling forest that I had come to regard as home. She spoke of how they had been hiking, just like any other day, when a sudden downpour had forced them to seek shelter. Stumbling upon an old abandoned cabin, they thought they had found a haven from the storm. But as night fell, the cabin became a prison. Strange sounds echoed from the woods around them, and one by one, her friends began to disappear. Only she managed to escape, finding herself lost in the woods, alone and terrified. Her words hung heavily in the air, a chilling reminder of the forest's dark reputation. The forest, which I had always viewed as a place of beauty and mystery, was now shadowed by an unnerving tale of disappearance and fear. I quickly radioed my team, her story echoing in their ears as they arrived at the clearing. With the woman leading the way, we trudged back through the forest, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with anticipation. The woman's story had transformed the forest from a place of beauty into a haunting landscape of shadows and whispers. Finally, we arrived at the abandoned cabin. It stood there, an ominous structure, its walls covered in moss and its roof sagging. Its dilapidated appearance bore testament to the passage of time, and the air inside was heavy with the musty scent of decay. The woman pointed to the cabin, her eyes wide with fear, and said, "They're in there, I know it." The cabin stood there, an ominous structure, its walls covered in moss and its roof sagging. The woman's tale had set a new course for our search, leading us to the heart of the forest's mystery. The cabin, and whatever secrets it held, waited for us in the heart of the ancient, sprawling forest. The air inside the cabin was heavy, filled with the musty scent of decay. Our steps were cautious, wary. We were seasoned rangers, trained for this. Yet the air of mystery that surrounded this cabin in the heart of Pine Haven Forest made even the bravest among us feel a sense of trepidation. Each step closer felt like a descent into an ominous tale spun by the forest itself. The woman, now our guide, was insistent. She was certain her friends were inside. Her conviction, however, was not comforting. It was as if her certainty was a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurked within the wooden structure that now loomed before us. The cabin was a relic of a time long past. Its weathered wooden panels told a story of years of abandonment, of nature slowly reclaiming its space. The windows were darkened, secrets held within their murky depths. The door hung slightly ajar, an eerie invitation to the unknown. The woman's fear was palpable. It was as if she was living her nightmare all over again. Each step towards the cabin seemed to take a toll on her, but she pressed on. She pointed towards the cabin, her trembling hand a stark contrast to the firmness in her voice. "They're in there," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a chilling moment. The cabin, the woman, the lost hikers, all pieces of a puzzle that the forest seemed to be presenting to us. The silence that followed her statement seemed to echo through the trees, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for our next move. Our approach to the cabin was slow, methodical. Each creak of the wooden floor beneath our feet, each rustle of the leaves around us, amplified in the silence. The woman's words hung in the air, a chilling prophecy of what awaited us within the cabin walls. She pointed to the cabin, her eyes wide with fear, and said, "They're in there, I know it." The cabin was a puzzle, a soundless sentinel, its secrets tucked away behind its weather-beaten walls. An eerie hush hung heavily around the cabin, a spine-chilling silence whispering tales of the forgotten and unspeakable horrors. We park rangers dared to enter its gloom-filled interior, our flashlights dissecting the curtain of darkness that enveloped it like a shroud. The inside of the cabin was a mirror reflection of its exterior. Deserted, yet oddly fascinating. Decades-old furniture hidden under ragged cloths lay beneath a blanket of dust, and cobwebs clung tenaciously to the corners, like spectral leftovers from another lifetime. The silence was pierced only by the groaning of seasoned wood and the faint rustling of hidden creatures. I led my team deeper into the cabin, our steps filled with trepidation, the suffocating atmosphere growing heavier with each passing moment. A murmur seemed to grow in volume, as though the cabin itself was eager to narrate its chilling tale, a story as cold as wind that rustled through its wooden bones. Hidden away in the cabin's innermost corners, the beams of our flashlights unveiled a concealed trapdoor tucked beneath a worn-out rug. A secret path hidden from unwanted glances laid bare. It was a portal to the unexplored, a threshold that promised to divulge the cabin's darkest secrets. The lady who had guided us here was adamant that this was the place where her friends had disappeared. With shaking hands, I lifted the door, revealing a confined wooden staircase leading down into the unknown. The air grew colder, the whispers louder. The cabin's mysteries were buried, not within its walls, but beneath them, waiting to be dug up. The darkness called, tempting us to step into the unknown, to unearth the buried under the cabin. Our discovery would forever alter our lives. The cabin was no mere abandoned edifice. It was a vault of secrets, a protector of a narrative that was about to unravel in the most horrifying manner. As we descended into the abyss, we bid farewell to the world we knew. A new chapter was about to unfold, a descent into the heart of the cabin's darkness. Descending into the unknown, we braced ourselves for what we might find. What greeted us was a chilling sight. The chamber was a vast, hollow cavern, its walls slick with dampness. It was a haunting tableau of decay and despair, filled with the stench of rot and the palpable taste of fear. In the dim, flickering light of our torches, we saw them. Old, rotting barrels stacked haphazardly, their contents unknown. The walls were covered in crude drawings, each more disturbing than the last. They depicted men, women, and children in various states of agony, their faces etched in torment. The drawings told a dark and chilling narrative, a tale of pain and suffering that was almost too much to bear. Then we saw them. They were there, the missing hikers shackled to the cold stone walls. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with terror, their bodies frail and weakened. They were the living embodiment of the horrors depicted on the walls. The woman who had led us there broke down, her sobs echoing through the chamber. She ran to her friends. As the reality of the situation sunk in, a cold dread settled in my heart. We had to get them out, and fast. I quickly radioed for backup, my voice trembling as I relayed our location and the condition of the hikers. We began to untie them, their chains cold and rusted, the echoes of their ordeal still lingering in the air. But as we prepared to leave, a voice boomed through the chamber, its tone low and menacing. "You shouldn't have come here," it warned, sending a chill down our spines. We exchanged uneasy glances, but our focus remained on the task at hand, getting the hikers to safety. Their faces pale with terror, they had been subjected to unspeakable horrors, but their ordeal was far from over. As we began our ascent, I couldn't help but feel that we were leaving something behind, something that was best left undisturbed. Little did we know the true horror was yet to reveal itself. As we prepared to leave, a voice echoed through the chamber, a low, grating sound that seemed to penetrate our very souls. The words it uttered were chilling, an ominous warning that sent shivers down our spines. "You shouldn't have come here," the voice intoned, its tone reminiscent of a death knell. We exchanged uneasy glances, the enormity of the situation sinking in. In that moment, the cabin and its hidden chamber transformed from a mere structure to a living entity, filled with a malevolent energy that seemed to pulsate in time with our racing hearts. The voice, disembodied and haunting, was a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. Despite the fear gnawing at our insides, we knew we had to leave. To stay would be to invite further horrors, horrors that our minds could hardly comprehend. We steeled ourselves, focusing on the task at hand, getting the survivors to safety. "You've disturbed something that was best left undisturbed," the voice said. Emerging from the underground chamber, the forest seemed to have come alive. The once familiar sanctuary had transformed into a living, breathing entity, bristling with a malevolent energy. The trees swayed and twisted as if possessed, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers, clawing at the stormy sky. The storm we had been warned about had finally arrived. Sheets of rain poured down from the heavens, drenching us to the bone, blinding us with its intensity. The wind howled, its mournful cry echoing through the forest, sending shivers down our spines. It was as if the elements themselves were conspiring against us, making our escape from the forest a struggle for survival. We trudged on, the hikers clinging to us for dear life. Each step was a battle, the mud sucking at our boots, threatening to drag us down. The once familiar trails had become treacherous, twisted by the storm, obscured by the darkness. We were lost in a world that had turned against us, a world that seemed determined to keep us within its grasp. The woman who had led us to her friends was silent, her face pale, her eyes haunted. She clung to my arm, her grip tightening with each crack of thunder, each flash of lightning. She didn't speak, but her eyes spoke volumes. They held a terror that went beyond the storm, beyond the forest. They held a terror that came from the depths of the underground chamber, a terror that had seeped into her very soul. As we battled our way through the forest, I couldn't shake off a feeling of dread. It wasn't just the storm, or the darkness, or even the haunting images from the underground chamber. It was something more, something sinister, something that whispered in the wind, that lurked in the shadows, something that was part of the forest itself. The forest seemed determined to keep us within its grasp, as if it were fighting to protect its secrets. Secrets that we had stumbled upon, secrets that we were not meant to discover. Secrets that were now etched into our minds, secrets that would haunt us for the rest of our lives. As we neared the edge of the forest, the woman turned to me. Her eyes held a distant, vacant look, as if she were seeing something far beyond the tree line. Her lips parted, and the words slipped out in a whisper that barely reached my ears over the howling wind. "It's not over," she cautioned, her voice trembling with an undertone of dread. "They're still out there." These cryptic words hung in the air, their weight pressing down on us like the storm clouds overhead. The forest fell silent. The wind ceased its mournful howl, and the rain paused its relentless assault. It was as if the entire world were holding its breath, waiting for the woman's foreboding prophecy to unfold. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their gnarled branches reaching out, as if trying to pull us back into the forest's dark embrace. With each step towards the park headquarters, the woman's words echoed in my mind, a chilling reminder of the horrors we had left behind. I couldn't help but glance back at the forest, its dark silhouette a stark contrast against the stormy sky. It stood there, harboring its secrets, its mysteries, its terrors. We finally reached the safety of the park headquarters, the warm light spilling out from the windows a stark contrast to the darkness we had left behind. As I guided the survivors inside, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. The woman's warning had planted a seed of doubt in my mind, a lingering fear that the forest was not done with us. I tried to rationalize her words, to make sense of the inexplicable events we had witnessed. But deep down, I knew that the forest held secrets that went beyond what I could comprehend. Secrets that were best left undisturbed, secrets that were alive, watching, waiting. "It's not over, they're still out there," she whispered, her eyes filled with a haunting emptiness. The forest's chilling lullaby echoed in my ears, a grim reminder that some mysteries are best left buried in the heart of the wilderness. Have you ever experienced something in the woods that defies explanation? Something that sends chills down your spine? Is a tale that might make you reconsider everything you thought was true. I'm Park Ranger John, a hardened officer who spent years patrolling the thick, puzzling forest known as Whispering Pines. It's a place where shadows play tricks on you, and the trees shared their secrets to those brave enough to listen. I was no stranger to the odd and the unexplainable. Over the years, I've grown used to the bizarre incidents within the forest's depths, attributing them to local legends and superstitions passed down through generations. But one day, during a routine patrol, I came across something that even made my seasoned heart skip a beat. Right in the core of Whispering Pines, a place notorious for its eerie silence, I stumbled upon a sight so peculiar it would have been laughable if it hadn't been so unnerving. There, in the heart of the vast wilderness, far from any marked trail or human settlement, stood a set of wooden stairs. These stairs were completely ordinary, as if they'd been plucked straight from a suburban home and dropped inexplicably into the wild. 15 steps in total, each crafted with impeccable precision, they appeared out of place in the wild, untamed nature surrounding them. The stairs looked untouched by time, showing no signs of decay, moss, or any other signs of prolonged exposure to the elements. As stood there, pondering this misplaced artifact, I felt an unsettling shift in the atmosphere. The air hung heavy, the leaves rustled with an eerie whisper, and I could almost hear the forest holding its breath. And there they stood, 15 steps of ordinary wooden stairs, inexplicably located in the heart of Whispering Pines. I approached the stairs, curiosity piqued. These weren't just ordinary stairs. They stood tall and firm, an eerie perfection to their construction. Each step was meticulously crafted, devoid of any signs of wear or tear, as if each had been chiseled by a master craftsman and then preserved in time. All 15 of them bore no trace of the forest's touch. No moss clung to the wood, no insects burrowed into the grain, not even a layer of dust dared to settle. They were an anomaly, a perfectly preserved piece of civilization in the heart of the wild. The forest around me seemed to grow denser, the air heavier with every step I took towards the stairs. The trees stood tall and foreboding, their shadows dancing on the ground, whispering secrets to those who dared to listen. Despite the unsettling atmosphere, I couldn't resist the allure of the stairs. Their silent call echoed through the otherwise noiseless forest. The closer I got, the more the forest seemed to react. The leaves rustled in the windless air, their whispers growing louder, more urgent. The trees swayed as if in a silent dance, their branches scraping against each other, creating a symphony of eerie sounds. The forest seemed to be alive, watching me, warning me. I could feel my heart thumping in my chest, the blood rushing through my veins. I had spent years in this forest, had grown accustomed to its peculiarities, its secrets. But this was different. This was a mystery that defied explanation, a puzzle that I felt compelled to solve. The stairs stood there, silent and unyielding, a challenge to my understanding of the world. As I reached out to touch the first step, I felt the wood beneath my fingers. It was cool and smooth, untouched by time or decay, a stark contrast to the living, breathing forest around me. The leaves rustled with an eerie whisper, and I sensed that I was not alone. The forest was watching, waiting, its silent anticipation hanging heavy in the air. The stairs, this enigma in the heart of the wilderness, were not just a mystery to be solved. They were a test, a challenge, a harbinger of things yet to come. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the woods as I patrolled, a whispering chorus that seemed to come from the trees themselves. It was a sound I had never encountered before, a spine-chilling murmur that lingered in the air. The voice was low and haunting, as though the forest was warning me. "Don't go up the stairs," it whispered, the words resonating in my mind like a spectral melody. I found myself frozen, my heart pounding heavily. The voice seemed omnipresent yet elusive, a ghostly presence that filled the forest with a sense of dread. It was a warning that was impossible to disregard, a plea from the forest as clear as it was terrifying. Yet despite the chill running down my spine, I felt a peculiar attraction towards the stairs. There they stood, silent and imposing, contrasting starkly with the forest's natural beauty. The voice's warning continued, intensifying with each passing second. Still, the stairs remained mysteriously enticing. My mind was teeming with thoughts. I knew I should adhere to the warning, turn back and abandon the stairs. But something about them lured me, a siren song impossible to resist. With a deep breath, I advanced toward the stairs, my hands shaking as I reached for the wooden railings. The forest voice grew frantic, its pleas reverberating through the trees. "Don't go up the stairs," it repeated, a mantra that filled the air with an ominous sense of foreboding. But I couldn't turn back. The stairs' mystery was too compelling. Ascending the stairs, the voice morphed into a deafening cacophony, a chorus of whispers flooding my ears. With each step, the voice amplified, its warning growing more desperate. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. The stairs' allure was too potent. Despite the warnings, I couldn't resist the inexplicable pull of the stairs. My heart pounded as I ascended, the voice in the forest fading with each step. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. The stairs had claimed me, their mystery too enthralling to ignore. As I reached the top, I found myself standing in a small, surreal clearing. It was an uncanny sight. A perfect circle of towering trees that seemed to reach up and touch the heavens. Their branches intertwined, forming a natural cathedral that was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. Silence was profound, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. In center of this supernatural sanctuary, I noticed a solitary, tattered book lying open. It was a sight of contradiction, common yet imbued with an aura of the extraordinary. The book was ancient, its pages weathered and yellowed with age. It was filled with cryptic symbols and strange, indecipherable script that seemed to dance and flicker under my gaze. Its presence was both alluring and unsettling, a beacon of mystery amidst the forest's enigma. I felt a strange compulsion to touch the book, to try and decipher its cryptic contents. Despite the warning of the forest, despite the sense of foreboding that had settled heavy in the pit of my stomach, I reached out towards it. I was like a moth drawn to a flame, unable to resist the allure of the unknown. As my fingers brushed the ancient pages, a sudden sharp pain shot through my hand. It as if I had touched a live wire, a jolt of pure raw agony that made me recoil. Blood welled up from a deep cut on my palm, a stark contrast against my pale skin. The book, it seemed, was not just a passive object. It had reacted, lashed out at my touch with a malevolent force that left me gasping. Forest, once a place of mystery and wonder, was now a realm of fear and pain. It was a world where ordinary stairs led to extraordinary places, where whispers carried warnings, and ancient books held secrets not meant for mortal eyes. As I reached down to touch the book again, a sharp, piercing pain shot through my hand. In panic, I spun around to descend the stairs, but as I did, the forest unleashed its fury. The earth beneath me started to quake, trembling with an intensity that rattled my bones and sent my heart pounding in my chest. It felt as if the forest was alive, retaliating to the disturbance with a raw anger that sent waves of terror coursing through me. The trees, those quiet guards that had stood watch over this land for centuries, twisted and writhed in a horrifying display. Their branches seemed to reach out, clawing at the air with a sinister aim. Every leaf, every twig, each rustling sound was a symphony of rage, a clear sign of the forest's displeasure. A biting wind swept through the clearing, screaming like a spectral entity in the night. It swirled around me, pulling at my clothes, stinging my face, and disturbing the pages of the ominous book that had set everything in motion. The once peaceful forest was now a whirlwind of chaos, its tranquility shattered by a force beyond understanding. The stairs, that strange structure that had sparked my interest, started to morph right before my eyes. The wooden steps seemed to expand and elongate, stretching farther and farther into the darkness. It was as if the stairs were pulling me in, ready to swallow me whole, to imprison me in the heart of the forest's fury. My heart hammered in my chest as I looked down at the expanding stairs. I was filled with dread, a fear so palpable that it threatened to consume me. I was trapped, caught up in the wrath of the forest, with no escape and no way back. With each passing second, the forest's fury seemed to amplify. The trees writhed more violently, the wind roared louder, and the stairs extended further into the abyss. I was entwined in a nightmare, a terrifying show of nature's fury. I'd trespassed in the domain of the whispers, violated the forest's sacred peace, and now I was facing the consequence. As I stared down at the expanding stairs, I was hit by the horrifying reality. I was trapped, a captive in the heart of the forest's fury, with no escape from the wrath of the whispering pines. The stairs themselves seemed to extend, stretching endlessly into the dark abyss. As I navigated the endless, twisting staircase, the symbols from the book seemed to materialize before me. They were like cryptic breadcrumbs, leading me deeper into the forest's foreboding embrace. Each step I took felt like a descent into a different dimension, a world where reality was distorted and twisted beyond comprehension. The symbols, once mere sketches in an old, dusty book, took on a life of their own. They pulsed with an unseen energy, their intricate shapes carved into the wooden stairs, glowing with an ethereal light. There was an ancient language, a forgotten script that held the key to untold secrets, secrets that the forest was eager to share. These symbols, they weren't just markings, they were a map, a guide into the abyss. I felt an overwhelming compulsion to follow, drawn in by the promise of revelation. With each step, the symbols seemed to shift and change, forming new paths, new directions, new riddles to solve. But it wasn't just the symbols. The forest itself seemed to join in the sinister chorus. The rustling leaves whispered their warnings, the creaking branches echoed the symbol's eerie melody. The wind carried a message, a tale of ancient rituals and forgotten deities. It was as if the forest was alive, its voice weaving tales of dread and doom. The deeper I descended, the more intense the whispers became. They filled my ears, my mind, drowning out all other sounds. The symbols and the whispers, they became inseparable, a symphony of terror playing on an endless loop. The forest's voice grew louder, a crescendo of haunting whispers that seemed to echo from the very depths of the earth. The symbols pulsed brighter, their light piercing the darkness, illuminating the path that lay ahead. The whispers grew louder, and the symbols became a relentless chorus, echoing through my mind. I was trapped in their haunting melody, a prisoner of their enigmatic allure. But the deeper I descended, the more I realized the forest wasn't just sharing its secrets, it was also sharing its madness. I descended further into the abyss, my sense of time and space unraveling. The world around me twisted and contorted, succumbing to the forest's cruel parody of reality. Each step I took seemed to draw me deeper into the forest's abysmal heart, the stairs spiraling endlessly into the shadowy depths below. The forest, once an innocent backdrop to my life as a park ranger, now revealed a more sinister identity. Its once calming rustle had morphed into an eerie whisper, its words a chilling symphony of hidden threats. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches reaching out like gnarled claws, eager to ensnare me in their deadly embrace. The darkness was oppressive, swallowing the feeble rays of moonlight that dared to penetrate its impenetrable veil. The shadows danced and shifted, taking on grotesque forms that seemed to watch me with unseen eyes. They taunted me, their silent laughter echoing through the gloom, a chilling reminder of my hopeless plight. The deeper I ventured, the more the forest seemed to relish in my despair. The stairs, once a symbol of safety and order, now served as a cruel trickster, leading me further into the forest's malevolent grasp. I could almost hear them laughing, their stone-cold faces bearing a silent, mocking grin. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl, its call a haunting dirge in the oppressive quiet. Every crunch of leaves underfoot sounded like a thunderclap, each snap of a twig a gunshot in the still air. The forest was alive, its every breath a chilling whisper in my ear, its every heartbeat a pounding drum in the pit of my stomach. The forest seemed to mock me, its eerie sounds and shifting shadows taunting me with an unrelenting malevolence. I was lost, a hapless puppet in a macabre play, the forest pulling the strings with sadistic glee. I was a prisoner in this twisted realm, the abyss my jailer, the forest my cell, and the stairs, they were my cruel warden, guiding me deeper into the forest's merciless clutches. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the stairs deposited me back at the base. As if they had spat me out, exhausted and defeated. I stood there, a shell of the person I'd once been, my mind a whirlwind of otherworldly horror. I was physically drained, my body aching from the relentless descent, my legs trembling beneath me. But it was the mental toll that was the most devastating. As I stumbled away from the stairs, their sinister hold on me began to wane. The whispers quieted, the symbols faded, and the forest's menacing aura receded. I was free, but the escape was bittersweet. Relief washed over me, but it was tainted by the chilling realization of how close I'd come to losing myself in the forest's malevolent grip. I navigated my way back through the labyrinthine woods, each step taking me further away from the stairs and their haunting allure. The forest seemed to sigh in resignation, letting me go, but not without leaving its indelible mark on me. When I finally emerged from the forest's shadowy depths, the world outside seemed brighter, more vibrant. It was as if I'd been trapped in a monochrome nightmare and was now stepping back into Technicolor reality, but the relief I felt was tempered by an overwhelming sense of unease. The forest had let me go, but I was not the same. I was marked, changed by the eerie encounter. The stairs, the whispers, the symbols, they were imprinted on my mind, a constant reminder of the horror I'd experienced. As I left the forest behind, I knew I was leaving a part of myself there too. I was escaping, but the scars would remain, a permanent reminder of the strange and mysterious stairs. The forest had exacted its vengeance, and I had become another victim of the strange and mysterious stairs. Haunted and scarred by my encounter, I left Whispering Pines forever changed by the enigmatic power that lay within the forest. The once familiar landscape now appeared alien, its tranquility replaced by an insidious silence that seemed to echo my torment. Each rustling leaf, each creaking branch, now a sinister reminder of the nightmarish ordeal I had endured. The stairs, like a specter, lingered in my mind, their haunting visage a constant reminder of the forest's chilling secret. With every step I took away from the forest, I felt their pull, a twisted siren's call that gnawed at my sanity. They had left an indelible mark on my psyche, their enigma etched deep within the labyrinth of my mind. In the solitude of my cabin, I found no respite. The symbols from the book, once an academic curiosity, now took on a menacing form. Each symbol, a chilling echo of the forest's whispers, a spectral hymn that played on an endless loop in my head, a haunting melody that underscored my waking hours and invaded my dreams. The forest and the stairs, they were no longer separate entities. They had merged into one, a symbiotic enigma, each feeding off the fear the other inspired. I had become entwined in their mystery, a reluctant participant in a game of cosmic horror, whose rules I could not comprehend. My encounter with the stairs and the forest had irrevocably altered the course of my life. I was no longer John, the park ranger, but John, the haunted, forever bound to the enigmatic power of the woods. The forest had claimed a part of me, its eerie mysteries forever etched in my soul. The stairs, like the forest itself, held secrets that defied explanation, and those who dared to interact with them were forever bound to the eerie mysteries of the woods. Have you ever wondered what lurks in the heart of a dark forest? I found myself questioning this one night when I received a distress call while stationed in the middle of a vast, ominous woodland. The message was crystal clear, yet chillingly disconcerting. A group of Boy Scouts had vanished during a routine camping trip. Their parents, terrified and desperate, were looking answers that only I, Ranger John, could give. With a heart brimming with fearlessness and dedication, I was ready to face whatever lay ahead. My toolkit for the dangerous mission was simple yet indispensable. A sturdy flashlight to penetrate the darkness, a map to chart my course, and an unwavering sense of duty that fueled my resolve. The notion of these young scouts being lost and alone in this expansive wilderness prompted me into urgent action. I was determined to reunite these boys with their panic-stricken parents and bring them back to the safety of their homes. As I set out on my mission, the forest seemed to close in around me, an uncanny silence replacing the ordinary bustle of woodland sounds. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, disrupted only by the crunching sound of leaves beneath my boots. I felt as if unseen eyes of the forest were watching me, monitoring my every move. As I navigated through the labyrinth of ancient trees, my intuition and the subtle indications of disturbance in the forest's natural order guided me. Signs like a snapped branch here, some trampled greenery there, they served as breadcrumbs, leading me deeper into the forest's heart. The beam from my flashlight cut through the darkness, unveiling gnarled branches that seemed to reach out like skeletal hands, clawing at the void. My journey took me deeper still, until I reached a glade where a disquieting aura lingered. There stood a contorted tree at the center, its branches creating a grotesque arch. The air around it vibrated with an energy that felt almost malevolent. Every step toward this unnerving sight made the reality of my mission more palpable. I realized I was not just searching for lost scouts anymore. I was about to confront the unknown. Armed with my trusty flashlight, a map, and a sense of duty, I plunged into the foreboding darkness of the woods. As I delved deeper into the labyrinth of ancient trees, an eerie hush enveloped the forest. I, Ranger John, a seasoned wilderness expert, felt the oppressive silence close in around me. The once familiar chatter of forest life was replaced by a chilling stillness. The only sounds now were the crunch of the leaves beneath my boots and the whisper of the wind as it weaved its way through the gnarled branches overhead. Forest was a dark tapestry of towering trees and shadowy undergrowth. The air hung heavy, filled with an unsettling sense of dread. As I pressed on, I couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes tracking my every move. An inexplicable chill ran down my spine, a primal warning of danger lurking in the shadows. The deeper I ventured into the heart of the forest, the more surreal my surroundings became. The moonlight cast a ghostly pallor over the scene, distorting shapes and casting long, monstrous shadows. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing twisted trees that seemed to reach out to me, their skeletal branches clawing at the blackened sky. The forest seemed to breathe around me, each exhale a chilling gust of wind, each inhale a tightening of the eerie stillness. My every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but the thought of the missing Boy Scouts propelled me forward. They were my responsibility. After what felt like hours of relentless pursuit, I stumbled upon a clearing. A strange energy hung in the air, a palpable sense of dread that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. At the center of the clearing, bathed in the spectral glow of the moonlight, stood a dilapidated and twisted tree. Its gnarled arched overhead forming a grotesque gateway into the unknown. The tree seemed to pulse with an ancient malevolence, its bark scarred by the passage of time and its roots buried deep into the heart of the forest. It was a chilling sight, a testament to the dark secrets that the forest held in its depths. At the center stood a dilapidated and twisted tree, its branches forming a grotesque arch. The heart of the forest had revealed itself, a beacon of darkness in the shadowy wilderness. I knew that the true journey was just beginning. As I cautiously approached, I discovered a hidden entrance beneath the grotesque arch. A veil of dread hung in the air, and a stench of rotting foliage assaulted my senses. The ground beneath me pulsed with an unnameable energy, and with a deep breath, I descended into the bowels of the lair. The air grew thick and cold as I navigated a maze of dank tunnels, each more disquieting than the last. Echoes of hushed whispers bounced off the damp stone walls, seeping into my bones and raising the hair on the back of my neck. Each step took me deeper into the heart of the labyrinth, the darkness closing in around me like an unwelcome shroud. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a cavernous chamber. The dim, flickering light of a solitary candle revealed a horrifying sight. The missing scouts, as pale as the moonlight that filtered through the cracks above, bound by ethereal chains that shimmered in the weak light. Their eyes, wide with terror, reflected the horror that had become their reality. A low, guttural laugh echoed through the chamber. The sound crawled up my spine, each cackle a testament to the evil that inhabited this accursed place. Turning slowly, I faced the source of the laughter. At the heart of the chamber stood a grotesque and withered figure. the witch. Her skin was as gnarled as the tree above, her eyes glowed with an unholy light, and her mouth, twisted into a cruel grin, revealed a row of sharp, needle-like teeth. Her presence filled the chamber, a palpable force of malevolence and dark power. The witch reveled in the fear that saturated the room, feeding off the terror that clung to the bound scouts. But I, although shaken, stood my ground. I knew I had a duty to perform, a promise to keep. I had to save the scouts, to bring them back from this nightmare. So, steeling myself for the confrontation that was to come, I faced the witch. The very stones of the lair seemed to pulse with dark energy, the air thick with anticipation. The witch's cackle echoed through the chamber once more, a chilling prelude to the battle that was about to unfold. The witch cackled, reveling in the terror that filled the room. Her laughter echoed around us, a cruel symphony woven with the cries of the captive Boy Scouts. John was not swayed by her display of power. I stood firm, my gaze locked onto her grotesque figure, my resolve unwavering. The witch, amused by my defiance, raised her gnarled hand, unleashing a torrent of dark energy. The chamber shook violently, the earthen walls threatening to cave in, but I stood my ground, my courage shining brighter than the ever-present darkness. It was a battle of wills, a test of courage against malevolence. I faced the witch. I was no magician. I had no spells to cast, no enchantments to weave. But I had something the witch did not: unwavering determination to save the innocent lives at stake. The witch, intoxicated by her power, underestimated me. She hurled curse after curse, each more sinister than the last. But with each attack, I met her gaze, my eyes reflecting not fear but the burning desire to end her reign of terror. The witch, enraged by my resilience, gathered her remaining power for a final assault. The chamber quaked, the air thick with anticipation. But before she could release her wrath, I took a step forward. My voice echoed through the chamber, a declaration of defiance that shattered the witch's confidence. "Your reign ends," I declared, my voice echoing through the chamber. The witch faltered, her focus broken by my resounding proclamation. Seizing the moment, I lunged at the witch, my courage cutting through her dark magic like a beacon of light. As the battle reached its climax, I managed to break the witch's enchantment, freeing the terrified scouts. With a triumphant roar, I led the scouts away from the witch's lair, leaving the defeated witch to vanish into the shadows, her reign of terror finally over. Together we fled the damned lair, leaving the wicked witch to vanish back into the obscurity. The forest, which was once a domain of evil and horror, seemed to exhale a breath of relief as its undesirable guest was expelled. It felt as if the venerable trees themselves were shaking off the freezing hold of the witch's magic, their twisted branches bending and groaning in the wind, recounting the courage they had observed. But as we retreated from the frightening depths of the forest, a deep silence fell upon us. Each step echoed through the quietude, a harsh reminder of the trial we had just endured. Our hearts throbbed in our chests, the rhythm a solemn beat that kept pace with our hastened steps. As we stepped out from the forest's edge, the world beyond appeared almost foreign. The city lights, once the beacon of warmth and familiarity, now shimmered with an unearthly uncertainty. The usual sounds of civilization struck a jarring chord after the phantom silence of the forest. As we reintegrated ourselves back into society, our trial was greeted with incredulity and admiration. News of our spine-chilling adventure spread rapidly, stirring a whirlwind of whispers and conjecture. However, despite the hum of our newfound fame, a grave calmness descended upon us. We had peered into the abyss and came out forever altered. The ensuing days, we found ourselves tormented by the echoes of our experience. The ordinary world seemed to glimmer with an invisible layer, a ghostly veneer that hinted at the terrors lurking just out of sight. The forest's chilling narrative had been etched into our souls, a grim tribute to the dark enigmas that lay concealed beneath the world's surface. As navigated the labyrinth of our daily lives, the memories of our trial hung around like spectral apparitions. The whispering wind through the trees, the rustling of leaves, the menacing shadows cast by moonlight. These were no longer simple elements of nature, but sinister reminders of our encounter with the paranormal. Little did we know that the dark secrets of the ancient woods would forever haunt the recesses of our minds, a reminder of the horrors that reside beyond the veil of the ordinary world. My name is John, and I used to be a ranger in the remote woods of Eldridge. I've always had a deep affinity for the solitude of the wilderness, the way the forest sings its own song, the comforting rhythm of nature's pulse. But there was one night that changed everything for me. It was in the depths of winter, a moonless night when the cold had a bite to it, and the wind whispered tales of old through the skeletal branches. The world was hushed under a blanket of snow, and the only sound that cut through the silence was the crunch of my boots. I was on my usual patrol, ensuring the trails were safe and everything was as it should be. But that night, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The silence was a cloak, and beneath it I heard something. A faint sound carried on the frigid breeze. Whispers. At first, they were distant, like echoes of a forgotten conversation, a secret the forest kept. I strained my ears, trying to decipher the words, but they danced just out of reach, a language unknown. I shook off the unease, attributing it to the eerie atmosphere the night had draped over the woods. But as I trudged forward, the whispers did not fade into the backdrop of the night. Instead, they grew in intensity, closer and undeniably more sinister. Each step I took seemed to stir them up, like I was walking deeper into a conversation I was not meant to hear. The forest, which was once my sanctuary, began to feel foreign and alive with an unseen presence. My flashlight cast long, distorted shadows between the trees, painting a macabre tableau of the night. The air thickened with a sense of dread, and I felt the weight of unseen eyes on me. Yet duty called, and I pressed on, the whispers now a constant companion in the otherwise silent night. I could no longer ignore them, their chilling tones creeping under my skin, setting my nerves on edge. But as I continued my patrol, the whispers grew louder, closer, and more sinister. I quickened my pace, my flashlight casting long shadows between the trees. The forest, once a sanctuary, now seemed to be a labyrinth of dark mysteries. The crunch of snow under my boots punctuated the eerie silence, a stark reminder of my solitude. The whispers, once distant and faint, were now a chorus of murmurs that seemed to be closing in, a chilling symphony that played on my deepest fears. A wave of unease washed over me, the wind carrying a cold dread that seeped into my bones. The whispers grew louder, their sinister undertones making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The darkness seemed to pulsate around me, each shadow a potential hiding place for the unseen. Suddenly, my flashlight beam fell on a clearing. At its heart was a circle of ancient, gnarled trees, their twisted forms reaching out like the hands of the damned. The whispers crescendoed, a symphony of voices that seemed to be emanating from the very trees themselves. And that's when I saw them. Shadowy figures standing among the trees, their forms nebulous and shifting. Their eyes shone with an otherworldly light, a cold spectral glow that seemed to pierce the darkness. A dread unlike any I had ever known gripped me, a primal fear that sent shivers down my spine. I fumbled for my radio, my fingers trembling as I tried to call for backup. But all I heard was static, the crackling interference a stark contrast to the ethereal whispers that seemed to fill the air. I was alone, trapped in this nightmarish tableau with only the spectral figures for company. They didn't move. They just stared, their whispers now a cacophony of eerie voices that seemed to echo in my mind. Their gaze was unyielding, their spectral eyes boring into me as if they could see into the very depths of my soul. It was a moment that felt like an eternity, a chilling tableau that still haunts my dreams. Suddenly the figures began to move, gliding towards me with an unnatural grace. Their movements were silent, yet every inch closer they came, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, more terrifying. My heart pounded like a drum against my ribcage, each beat a frantic plea for escape. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as I fumbled to move backwards, desperate to put distance between myself and the approaching shadows. But my boots, once sturdy and dependable, felt as if they were mired in molasses. Each step was a Herculean effort, and yet the figures continued their relentless advance. The forest, my once peaceful sanctuary, had become a living nightmare. The trees stretched upwards, their branches clawing at the starless sky like skeletal fingers. They seemed to twist and contort, creating an impenetrable barrier that closed in around me. I was trapped, a mouse cornered by an unseen predator. My breath came in ragged gasps, fogging up the chilly air as I fumbled for my radio. But the device, once a lifeline to the outside world, was nothing more than a useless piece of plastic and metal. The static that filled the air was as cold and unfeeling as the figures that loomed ever closer. Panic, raw and unfiltered, surged through my veins, fueling a primal instinct that had lain dormant until now. The need to survive, to escape, overpowered every rational thought. And so I ran. I ran as if my life depended on it, because in that moment it did. The whispers were a deafening roar in my ears, a cruel symphony that played to the rhythm of my pounding heart. Their voices were a chilling reminder of my pursuers, a relentless echo that spurred me on. The forest was a blur of shadows and moonlight, the trees rushing by in a dizzying whirl of fear and adrenaline. I could feel the figures behind me, their presence an icy chill that nipped at my heels. And yet, I dared not look back. I could not afford the luxury of fear. I ran, the whispers now a deafening roar in my ears. The forest, once a sanctuary, was now a labyrinth of terror, and I was its hapless prisoner. But I would not go quietly into the night. I would not surrender to the shadows. I would fight. I would survive. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pursued, that something malevolent lurked just beyond the beam of my flashlight. Every shadow seemed to twitch with unspoken menace. Every rustle of the wind through the bare trees sent a chill down my spine. I stumbled through the underbrush, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. The forest, once a place of solitude and tranquility, had become a labyrinth of terror. The path I had walked so many times before was now a twisted maze, the familiar landmarks shrouded in darkness and distorted by fear. I felt disoriented, lost, as if the very earth beneath my feet had shifted, throwing me into a world I no longer recognized. The whispers grew louder, the voices more insistent, like a chorus of specters urging me on, driving me deeper into the heart of the forest. It was as if the woods themselves were alive, breathing, watching. I could feel the eyes of the unseen on me, hear the rustle of leaves as the shadowy figures closed in. I tripped, fell, felt the cold kiss of snow against my face. I pushed myself up, ignoring the sting of scraped palms and the icy chill seeping through my clothes. Fear lent me strength, adrenaline fueling my desperate flight. The world around me was a blur of darkness and shadows, the beam of my flashlight dancing over gnarled tree roots and snow-covered undergrowth. And then, just when I thought I couldn't go on, I saw it, the edge of the forest. I pushed myself harder, my legs burning, my lungs screaming for air. The whispers became a roar, a cacophony of voices that drowned out everything else. But I didn't stop, couldn't stop. I don't remember how I made it out of those cursed woods, but when I emerged, I was disheveled, my clothes torn and my mind haunted by the echoes of those otherworldly whispers. My sanctuary had become my prison, my refuge, a nightmare. And though I had escaped, I knew I would never truly leave the forest behind. I resigned from my post as a ranger, unable to shake the feeling that I had trespassed into something beyond the realm of the living. The experience had left an indelible mark on me, a haunting memory that would forever linger in the corners of my mind. Every crunch of leaves underfoot, each rustle of the wind through the trees, sent a chill down my spine, a reminder of that fateful night. I could still hear the whispers, a haunting symphony of voices that seemed to echo from the darkest corners of the woods. They were a constant reminder of the unseen, of the unknown, of the otherworldly. Sleep became a luxury, a respite that was often interrupted by nightmares of shadowy figures with gleaming eyes. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest, the echoes of those eerie voices still ringing in my ears. The once familiar and comforting silhouette of the forest was now a terrifying apparition in the dead of night. I avoided the woods, the place I once considered my home, my sanctuary. The trails I used to patrol, the trees I used to admire, they all seemed to hold a sinister secret, a hidden horror that I dared not confront. The forest, once a source of peace and solitude, was now a haunting reminder of the terror I had witnessed. My life took a different turn after that incident. I left the solitude of the forest for the hustle and bustle of the city, trading the quiet whisper of the wind for the honking of cars and the chattering of people. Yet, even amidst the noise and chaos, I could still hear the whispers, a chilling reminder of the horror that lurked in the heart of the woods. The forest, once my home, now holds secrets that I dare not uncover. The whispers, the figures, the terror, they are all a part of the woods now, a chilling testament to the unknown that lurks in the heart of nature. The woods, once a place of peace and solitude, had become a haunting labyrinth of nightmares, that I dared not venture into again. The wind whispered through the towering pines as I patrolled the darkened trails of Pinecrest National Park. My name is John, a ranger, the sentinel of these woods for more years than I care to count. There's a certain allure to the wilderness, a crispness in the air, the rustle of leaves beneath your boots, the hush that blankets the world as the sun dips below the horizon, leaving only the moon to keep you company. But tonight the forest felt different. It was as if the trees were holding their breath, as if the entire natural world was waiting for something that sent a shiver of anticipation rippling through the underbrush. My hand tightened around my flashlight, its beam cutting a swath through the inky blackness, the only bulwark against the enveloping night. These woods are ancient, alive with stories whispered from one generation of rangers to the next. Tales of inexplicable occurrences, of voices carried on the wind, of figures glimpsed in the corner of the eye. Most of us dismiss these stories as the product of overactive imaginations fueled by the solitude and the shadows. Yet as I ventured deeper, the familiar comfort of the forest gave way to a growing sense of unease. The symphony of nocturnal life, usually so vibrant, was conspicuously absent, replaced by an unsettling silence that seemed to swallow the crunch of my boots on the gravel path, amplifying it into a thunderous echo that reverberated in the stillness. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, an instinctual reaction to the shift in the atmosphere. The forest was no longer a refuge, but a stage set for some unknown drama. My heart pounded in my chest, a steady drumbeat in the silent tableau. And then, the silence was broken. My radio crackled to life, its abrupt chatter cutting through the stillness like a knife. Reports of strange sightings near the old mill trail. A cold knot of apprehension twisted in my gut as I changed my course, plunging deeper into the heart of the mystery. The crunch of my boots on the gravel seemed to echo in the stillness, sending shivers down my spine. My radio crackled to life, startling me. "John, come in. We've got reports of strange sightings near Old Mill Trail. Check it out, over." The voice echoed in the stillness, a jarring reminder of the civilization I'd left behind. With a swift acknowledgement, I changed my course, steering my boots toward the Old Mill Trail. As I moved further into the forest, the air grew colder, as if the trees themselves were exhaling icy breaths. A thick fog began to settle, clinging to the gnarled branches and transforming the familiar landscape into a spectral tableau. The silence was deafening, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the frost-kissed leaves. My flashlight sputtered, its beam cutting through the fog like a lighthouse beacon lost in a stormy sea. The light danced upon the fog, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to sway independently of their wooden counterparts. Each step brought me closer to the old mill, an ancient structure that stood as a testament to time's relentless march. Once a bustling hub of activity, it now lay abandoned, the wooden planks weathered and worn, the windows hollow and lifeless. As I neared the mill, an unnatural chill swept through the air. It was as if the warmth had been sucked out of the world, leaving behind only a cold, hollow echo. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it whispers of forgotten tales and lost souls. The mill's creaky wheel, a rusty remnant of a bygone era, began to turn slowly. There was no wind to propel it, no water to give it momentum. It moved as if guided by an unseen hand, the rusty metal groaning in protest. Strangely, the sight of the turning wheel comforted me. It was a sign of life, a beacon of hope in the midst of the eerie wilderness. But as I watched the wheel turn, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. The mill's creaky wheel turned slowly, propelled by an unseen force. I heard a distant, mournful howl that sent shivers down my spine. The sound was an alien melody, a tune that seemed to echo from some forgotten corner of the world. It wasn't the call of any creature indigenous to Pinecrest National Park. The howl seemed to resonate through the trees, an eerie lament carried on the wind, disturbing the silence of the night. The forest seemed to respond to the mournful call, the rustling leaves whispering secrets I couldn't comprehend. The shadows deepened, and the moon, once a comforting presence, seemed to shy away, leaving me in an impenetrable darkness. The flashlight in my hand, my only source of light, flickered one last time before giving out completely. The darkness swallowed me whole, leaving me blind in the heart of the forest. I was a stranger in a world that had suddenly turned hostile. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic rhythm that seemed deafening in the quiet wilderness. The cold seeped into my bones and the eerie silence was shattered by another sound, an ominous guttural growl. It was closer this time, a threatening rumble that seemed to reverberate in the very air around me. The sense of dread intensified, wrapping around me like a shroud. I fumbled for the spare batteries in my pocket, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The growl echoed again, closer, louder, a tangible reminder of the unseen danger lurking in the shadows. The chill of the night bit into my skin and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. The howl echoed once more, a mournful sound that seemed to carry a warning. I was an intruder in this realm of darkness, a trespasser in a world that belonged to creatures of the night. The forest held its breath, the silence thick and suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat, a frantic drumbeat against the quiet of the night. The growl resonated again, closer than ever, a sound that seemed to come from the very depths of the forest. Panic set in as I fumbled for spare batteries, my hands shaking. The darkness seemed to press in from all sides, a relentless, suffocating force. The growl echoed once more, a sinister promise of things to come. I forced myself to move, relying on instinct and the moon's feeble glow to guide me. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows and sounds, each rustle and creak echoing through the darkness like a phantom's lament. The underbrush was thick and unyielding, its gnarled roots tripping me up as I navigated the treacherous terrain. Suddenly, a pair of glowing eyes appeared in the shadows. They shone like two luminescent orbs, radiating a cold, eerie light that seemed to pierce the darkness. They followed my every move, their gaze unwavering and intense. I could feel them on me, watching, waiting. In the depths of my fear, I could feel an odd kind of fascination. Who or what was this creature lurking in the darkness? Was it a figment of my imagination, a trick of the light, or something far more sinister? My radio crackled to life once again, its sudden noise startling me. The voice that came through was garbled, distorted, as if it was being transmitted from another dimension. The words were unintelligible, a cacophony of static and strange alien sounds. It was as if the forest itself was trying to communicate with me, its voice a chilling symphony of whispers and echoes. The eyes in the shadows didn't waver. Their gaze locked onto me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. They were like two beacons in the darkness, their glow becoming brighter and more intense with each passing second. The oppressive silence of the forest was suddenly shattered by the sound of footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, echoing through the darkness with a chilling precision. They were in perfect sync with my own, a macabre mirror of my fear-stricken journey through the forest. The more I moved, the closer the footsteps seemed to get. The forest was alive with sounds now, a cacophony of whispers and rustles that seemed to be closing in on me. It was as if the very trees were conspiring against me, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers in the darkness. As the footsteps grew louder, I could feel a presence closing in on me. The eyes in the shadows seemed to grow brighter, their gaze more intense. The forest held its breath, waiting for what was to come next. The oppressive silence was shattered by the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and in perfect sync with my own. Panic and fear gripped me, but I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest. The trees whispered secrets in the wind, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Then, out of the inky blackness, a ghostly figure emerged. It was cloaked in shadows, its face hidden beneath a tattered hood. It was a specter of the forest, an embodiment of the fears whispered among us rangers. The figure raised a hand, motionless, as if time itself had stopped. It spoke, its voice a chilling whisper that seemed to come from the depths of the forest itself. "You trespass in a realm not meant for the living, John," it said. The words hung in the air, icy and foreboding. "Leave now, or become a part of the eternal darkness." I stumbled backward, my blood turning to ice. The realization hit me like a punch in the gut. The tales weren't just stories. They were warnings, and I had ignored them. I was a stranger in a land that belonged to the shadows, and they wanted me gone. I turned to flee, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The eyes in the shadows followed my every move, watching, waiting. The forest was alive with a sinister energy, the trees closing in around me. The figure stood still, a haunting silhouette against the moonlit backdrop. But as I stumbled through the underbrush, the figure began to fade. It became one with the shadows, its form dissolving into the darkness. Its warning echoed in my mind, a chilling reminder of the unseen dangers lurking in the forest. The fog thickened, swallowing the last remnants of the ghostly figure. I was alone again, but the forest was different. It was haunted, alive with a presence I couldn't explain. I knew then that I would never look at Pinecrest National Park the same way again. The fog thickened, and the figure vanished, leaving me alone in the haunted woods. Imagine a quiet evening in Algonquin Park, Ontario. The usual peace, with a family out for their day hike with their spirited dog. Meet me, a seasoned park ranger, whose every day was punctuated by the regular sightings of this family and their dog. The dog, a ball of energy, never failed to bring a smile to my face. It would dart between the family and us rangers, its tail a constant blur of motion. A dog so curious it seemed to have an insatiable thirst for adventure and exploration. I would often find myself playing with the dog, tossing sticks into the forest for it to fetch, a game that brought sheer joy to both of us. The dog was a constant, a regular in the park, just like the family it belonged to. And I was more than just a park ranger to them. I was a friend, a familiar face amidst the vast expanse of the wilderness. Their usual routine consisted of day hikes along the park's many trails. The family, 2 boys and their parents, along with their dog, would set out on these trails, their laughter and chatter a pleasant interruption to the park's tranquility. The dog would run up and down, back and forth, its energy infectious and its spirit uncontainable. Little did I know that my routine day at the park was about to become anything but routine. On that fateful evening, I was tasked with locating the family as they had taken an unusually long time on the trail. As I made my way along on the path, I came across the 2 boys. Their faces were as white as a sheet, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and surprise. They quickly relayed the terrifying incident that had just occurred. Their dog, full of energy and curiosity, had been running up and down the trail, as was usual. This time, however, the dog's enthusiasm had taken a horrifying turn. In his excitement, he had run straight off the edge of a cliff, a good 50 to 60 feet drop. By some miracle, the dog had landed on a ledge about 10 feet down, but any movement could send him tumbling the rest of the way. The boys were frantic, unsure of what to do, when out of nowhere, a hiker appeared. This wasn't just any hiker, but one fully equipped with climbing gear, which was unusual for this area. Without wasting a moment, the hiker descended the cliff, rescued the dog, and then he simply disappeared back up the trail. He didn't wait around for thanks or even share his name. He was a savior who just appeared, did his job, and vanished into the trail. The boys, still in shock, were told to return to their awaiting parents. As for me, I decided to follow the trail of the mysterious man, hoping to offer my gratitude and perhaps introduce him to some of the lesser-known but breathtaking areas of the park. The footprints were fresh, an echo of the stranger's presence. They led me deeper into the woods, away from the familiar trails. As I trudged on, the forest grew quiet, its usual chatter replaced by an eerie silence. Suddenly, the footprints ended at a clearing. There, in the middle of this tranquil wilderness, stood a peculiar sight. And there it stood, a lonely door in the middle of nowhere, knocking gently as if inviting me in. I approached the door, curious and slightly unnerved. It stood alone in the clearing, an anomaly in the wild, its weathered surface speaking of age and a purpose long forgotten. The brass handle gleamed oddly in the dappled sunlight, a stark contrast to the worn wood it was set in. As I drew closer, an odd sound reached my ears, a gentle, rhythmic knock. Confused, I circled the door, expecting to find a prankster hiding behind it, but the area around was as empty as the rest of the clearing. The knocking ceased as I neared, leaving me in a silence that felt heavy, almost ominous. The surface of the door was surprisingly cold under my touch, a chill that seemed to seep into my bones despite the summer heat. On a whim, I rapped my knuckles against the wood, the sound echoing oddly in the stillness. "Knock, knock, is anyone there?" I called out, half joking, half serious. The response was immediate, a deep, gravelly voice inviting me in. Recoiling in shock, I leaned closer, pressing my ear against the door. The faint sound of breathing filled my ears, a chilling confirmation of the voice's existence. Tentatively, I reached out, wrapping my fingers around the brass handle. A tingling sensation, like a low current, traveled up my arm, causing my hair to stand on end. The door pulsed beneath my hand, a soft glow enveloping it. Then, with a sudden force that took me by surprise, it knocked me off my feet. As I hit the ground, A sharp pain shot through my head, my vision blurring at the edges. Struggling to stay conscious, I could only watch as the door slowly creaked open, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. 2 feet stepped out from the void, heading towards me. The last thing I remember before blacking out was the sight of the door opening and a pair of feet approaching me. When I came to, I found myself leaning against a tree, the door nowhere in sight. My head throbbed, a dull reminder of the encounter with the inexplicable door. My mind scrambled to understand. The forest around me was just the same as it always was, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. The air was filled with the usual sounds, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of a bird, the gentle whisper of the wind. Yet, there was an eerie silence where the door had stood. I pushed myself off the tree and stood up, my legs wobbly. I walked to the spot where the door had been, my heart pounding. The ground was undisturbed, no footprints, no trace of the door. It was as if the door had never existed. I reached out, half expecting my hand to meet the cold surface of the door, but it only met the emptiness of the air. I stood there, reeling from the bizarre encounter. My mind raced with questions. Had I imagined the entire thing? But the harsh voice that had invited me in, the cold touch of the door, the pulse of light, they all felt too real to be a figment of my imagination. I walked back to the trail, my mind in a whirl. I looked back once more, hoping to catch a glimpse of the door, but there was nothing. Only the lush green of the forest, standing tall and silent as if guarding an ancient secret. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I couldn't shake off the memory of the door, the voice, the light. Every rustle in the leaves, every shadow cast by the setting sun seemed to whisper of the mysterious door. I found myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see the door appear out of nowhere. Was it a dream or was it real? The mystery of the door remains, forever etched in my mind. The unresolved mystery of the door in the forest continues to haunt me, a chilling reminder of the unknown lurking in the shadows. Underneath the glow of a flickering campfire, surrounded by the eerie whispers of the wilderness, a group of park rangers gathered, eager to share their tales of the unknown. Among them, John, a seasoned ranger, took the lead. His eyes, reflecting the dancing flames, were filled with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The night was still, with only the crackling fire punctuating the silence, a perfect setting for their storytelling ritual. First to break the silence was Sally, a young ranger with a thirst for adventure. Her story took them to the rugged terrain of Philmont Scout Ranch in New Mexico. It was a story from her scouting days, a memory that had clung to her like the scent of a campfire. She and her troop were on a 10-day backpacking trek, the kind that tests your mettle and your nerve. After being caught in an unexpected thunderstorm that pelted them with hail, they found solace at their campsite. With a fire kindled to dry their clothes, they noticed an oddity that would etch itself into their memories. A tent stake bag was hanging from a nearby tree, swinging back and forth. It was an unusual sight, for there was no wind to stir it, no reason for it to move. But there it was, swinging, as if propelled by an unseen force. They watched it, intrigued, and a little unnerved, as the bag continued its motion, even when they tried to stop it. As the fire's embers began to fade, they retreated to their tents, the swinging bag an unsettling lullaby. As they drifted off to sleep, the tent stake bag continued to swing, undisturbed by wind or weather, a mystery left unsolved. The wilderness, as Sally's story reminded them, was filled with such mysteries, secrets whispered between the trees, hidden in the shadows. And as the fire crackled and popped, they leaned in closer, ready for the next tale to unfold. Sally, her voice barely more than a whisper against the crackling of the fire, continued with another tale, this time from a camping trip in Florida. The air around the fire seemed to tighten, the shadows growing darker as the group leaned in, captivated by her words. She and her sister, fueled by curiosity and the thrill of adventure, had decided to explore the trails late at night. They stumbled upon a trail connected to their own, marked off by yellow tape strung up between 2 trees. It was a clear warning, a sign to stay away, but they chose to ignore it, stepping over the line and into the unknown. They had barely taken 15 steps into the trail when they heard it. Clear as the night sky overhead, unmistakable and chilling, their mother's voice echoed around them. "Honey, why's your nose bleeding?" Yet their mother was hundreds of miles away, not on this trip with them. They spun around, eyes wide as they searched the darkness for the source of the voice. But they found nothing. Just the silent trees and the distant rustle of leaves in the wind. A sense of unease washed over them, their hearts pounding in their chests as they quickly decided to retreat. But as they turned to leave, Sally's sister suddenly clutched her nose. A thin trickle of blood seeped through her fingers. A nosebleed that lasted for about 20 seconds, just as the voice had eerily predicted. The coincidence was too uncanny, too terrifying to ignore. Their mother's voice, the warning, and then the nosebleed. It was as if the forbidden trail had somehow known, had somehow reached out to them with a chilling premonition they couldn't comprehend. With the echo of their mother's voice still lingering in the air and the blood drying on her sister's face, they turned their backs to the forbidden trail and hurried back to their camp. The night was far from over, but the tale had left them all with a sense of unease, a reminder of the unknown that lurked in the darkness around them. As the embers of the fire danced in the darkness, Ranger Jimmy decided it was his turn to share his encounter with the unknown. He began, "You see, there was this one camping trip in Colorado that still gives me the chills. We had pitched our tent in a serene patch of wilderness. The kind where the moon shines so bright at night, it's almost as if you could reach out and touch it. The air was crisp, the tranquility was almost palpable, and the three of us, huddled in our small tent like sardines, were fast asleep. But then something strange happened. I woke up, still half asleep, to an odd warmth on my side, a sensation of something pressing against the tent. At first I thought I had somehow rolled over into the middle of the tent, but then my heart skipped a beat as I opened my eyes. The tent wall was still on my side, and there was something outside, a warm body sleeping against my side of the tent. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, and I was somewhat petrified. But I knew I had to act. So I leaned over to wake up my friends, trying not to make a sound. And in that moment, whatever it was outside, it took off. I could hear the rustling of leaves, the breaking of twigs, and the swift fading footsteps. It was definitely some kind of animal, but what kind, I couldn't tell. The idea of a wild creature, maybe a young deer or something else bedding down next to humans, it was mind-boggling. And when we finally mustered the courage to step outside, there it was. An imprint on the ground, the only sign of the uninvited guest that had shared our campsite that night. But what it was, we never found out. As the morning sun rose, the creature, whatever it was, had disappeared, leaving behind only an imprint on the ground and an unsettling memory. The fire was almost out, the stories were told, and a chilling silence hung in the air. The flickering shadows danced less frequently now, their intensity dulled as the flames gave way to glowing embers. The tales of the night, like the fire, had been fierce and illuminating, casting light on the unseen corners of the wilderness and the mysteries they held. Each ranger, still seated around the dying fire, was deep in thought. The veil of jocularity lifted, replaced by an unsettling contemplation. The stories they shared were more than just eerie campfire tales. They were personal experiences, encounters with the inexplicable, the uncanny. John, the seasoned park ranger, found himself lost in a whirlpool of thoughts. He felt a strange sense of camaraderie, a shared understanding that the wilderness was a realm of the unknown. Sally's tale of the swinging steak bag and the spectral voice from the forbidden trail, Jimmy's account of the uninvited guest. They were all threads woven into the intricate tapestry of the wilderness. The silence of the night, once comforting, was now a stark reminder of their experiences. It was as if the wilderness itself held its breath, listening intently to their stories, silently observing from the shadows. The stillness was profound, the quiet interrupted only by the occasional crackle of the fire and the distant hoot of an owl. The rangers sat in silence, each lost in their own world of thoughts. The night sky, once a source of beauty and wonder, now seemed to hold an eerie sense of mystery. The twinkling stars looked down upon them, silent witnesses to their shared experiences. The wilderness, they realized, was both their sanctuary and their enigma. It was a place of breathtaking beauty and tranquility, but also a realm of secrets, of stories untold. The wilderness was a silent storyteller, whispering tales of the unknown into the ears of those brave enough to listen. As they stared into the dying embers of the fire, each ranger was left with the chilling realization that the wilderness, as beautiful as it was, held secrets that were better left undiscovered. Just as the silence was about to swallow the night, a rustling in the bushes caught their attention. The flickering firelight was dancing on their faces, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to come alive with each passing moment. The sound was subtle at first, like a soft whisper carried by the wind, but it quickly grew into a distinct rustle, a clear indication that they were not alone. The night was as black as ink, a blanket of darkness that seemed to stretch out indefinitely. The rangers, their hearts pounding in their chests, turned their gaze towards the source of the sound, their eyes straining to pierce through the impenetrable darkness. The rustling grew louder, closer, each crunch and snap of twigs underfoot echoing through the silent woods like a thunderclap. They exchanged glances, their faces a mixture of anticipation and fear. They were seasoned rangers, men and women who had spent years in the wilderness, who had come face to face with the unpredictable forces of nature. But this was different. This was a primal fear, the kind that sends chills down your spine and makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Their hands instinctively reached for their flashlights, their fingers trembling slightly as they clicked them on. The beams of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the surrounding trees and bushes, but the source of the noise remained hidden. Every rustle, every snap, only added to the suspense, a symphony of sounds that seemed to be building towards a crescendo. They braced themselves, their bodies tense as they prepared for whatever was about to emerge from the shadows. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence only broken by the occasional crackle of the fire, and the steady, rhythmic rustling that was drawing ever closer. As the rustling grew louder, they held their breath, waiting for whatever was about to emerge from the darkness. But that, my friends, is a story for another time. Among us was Philip, a seasoned ranger with years of experience under his belt. He was known for his calm demeanor and his uncanny ability to navigate the wild with an almost instinctual ease. But tonight, as he cleared his throat to begin his tale, there was an undeniable tremor in his voice. Philip began, his words weaving an eerie tale that took us back 8 years when he was a young camp counselor at Camp Tommy, nestled in the remote woods of Fishkill, New York. He painted a vivid picture of the isolated cabins, each half a mile apart, scattered atop a desolate mountain. He recounted one fateful night when he decided to break the camp's curfew and meet his camp girlfriend, a journey that led him through the dense woods. His voice lowered to a hush as he narrated how he heard a rustling in the bushes. Expecting it to be a bear or some other woodland creature, he was stunned when a 3-foot-tall humanoid figure emerged from the shadows. He described it as a featureless, miniature person, its body solid black against the darkness. The way it moved, he said, was mechanical, as if it were doing a robot dance, and it ran with a speed that was inhuman. Philip's story was met with wide-eyed stares. It wasn't just the tale itself, but the way he told it, the tremor in his voice, the look in his eyes. It was clear that whatever he'd encountered that night had left a deep imprint on him. As Philip's voice wavered, we all sat in stunned silence, the chilling image of the mechanical humanoid creature etched in our minds. Philip took a deep breath, his face pale in the firelight as he delved deeper into his encounter. "This happened around 8 years ago when I was barely in my 20s, he began, his voice a low murmur against the crackling of the fire. "I was working as a camp counselor for Camp Tommy in Fishkill, New York. It's a place nestled in the woods atop a mountain with cabins scattered half a mile apart. You feel isolated, but in a comforting, close-to-nature kind of way." Philip paused, his eyes distant, lost in the memory. "One night, around 1 in the morning, I was sneaking off to meet my camp girlfriend. We were supposed to stay in our cabins after 10, but youthful rebellion, right?" A wry smile tugged at his lips. "I was cutting through the woods to get to her cabin when I heard a rustle. I stopped, expecting a bear or some other creature. What I wasn't expecting was a 3-foot-tall humanoid figure jumping out of the bushes." His voice dropped lower, the tone growing more serious. "It was too dark to make out any features. It was standing on 2 feet, had 2 arms, and essentially looked like a miniature person, but featureless, solid black. Curiosity piqued, I started walking towards it. That's when it bolted back into the woods." Philip's hands moved in tandem with his words, mimicking the creature's movements. Its movement was mechanical, like someone doing the robot dance. Its whole body shifted 90 degrees and it just took off. I've never seen anything on 2 legs run that quickly. I'm a fit, fast runner myself, but this creature, it was on another level of speed. He fell silent for a moment, a frown creasing his forehead. It was very human-like, but too short to be a human. And I don't know how a human could run that fast anyway. It looked solid black, as if it was devoid of any clothing or discernible features. Even after all these years, it puzzles me. It was so unearthly, yet so human. The fire popped and hissed, the only sound in the silence that followed Philip's story. His gaze was fixed on the dancing flames, lost in the enigma of the past. I still can't make sense of it, he confessed, shaking his head. I have no idea what it was. It bothers me, that I can't put a name or a face to it. His eyes met ours again, a spark of determination in them. Maybe one day, I'll go back to Camp Tommy, try to find this creature again, see if I can solve this mystery that's been haunting me for years. He leaned back, his story told, his encounter shared, leaving us all in a silence that was filled with thoughts of what lurked in the darkness beyond the reach of the firelight. To this day, I have no idea what it was, but it still bugs me. Maybe one day I will go back to try and find this creature again. As Philip's tale ended, a hush fell over us, until Jane, a ranger I had never met before, broke the silence with her story. She began by painting a vivid picture of her and a friend, Susan, on a loosely planned camping trip across different states in the U.S., with a goal to hit 13 states in total. Their journey was one of discovery and adventure, not tied down by the restraints of a firm itinerary. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, they found themselves driving through the quiet, rolling landscapes of Amish country in Indiana. A sense of despair washed over them, as they feared they would not find a campground before nightfall. But, much to their delight, amidst the tranquility of Amish country, they stumbled upon a charming campground. It was a quaint place, complete with a large, inviting pond for swimming, and a designated tent camping area, secluded and nestled away in a nice forested area. Jane's voice dropped lower, the firelight casting eerie shadows on her face as she moved on to the truly peculiar part of the story. Down in the secluded tent camping area, they discovered another campsite. But it was not the presence of the campsite that was strange. Rather, it was its state of abandonment. Food lay scattered about, plates strewn haphazardly on and around the picnic table, bottles of mustard and mayo left open to the elements. The scene was unsettling, as if the campers had vanished mid-meal. One tent had succumbed to the wind and was blown over, while the other remained sturdily staked to the ground. Upon mentioning this to the campground staff, they were met with surprise. Apparently, the deserted spot belonged to a man who was tasked with overseeing the tent spots. The staff had no idea he wasn't there. Jane and Susan, driven by a morbid curiosity, checked the tents for any signs of life, but they found nothing, just sleeping bags and the eerie silence of a place suddenly abandoned. It was as if the inhabitants had been beamed up by aliens, leaving everything behind. Jane's voice dropped to a whisper as she recounted their discovery at the campsite. The atmosphere around the fire grew tense as everyone leaned in, drawn by the eeriness of her tale. Their evening at the campsite had started off as any other, she explained. The sun had set, leaving behind a picturesque dusk that painted the vast Indiana sky with hues of pink and violet. The campground was a haven of tranquility, nestled amidst Amish country, a world away from the hustle of city life. The peculiarity began when they noticed the other tent. It was a picture of abandonment, a still life portrait of a meal abruptly left unfinished. Plates and cutlery were scattered on the picnic table, and bottles of mustard and mayo lay forgotten, their contents slowly succumbing to the elements. A sense of unease crept over Jane and Susan as they approached the tent. The campsite seemed untouched, as if its occupants had vanished into thin air, their minds buzzed with questions. Where were the campers? Why would they leave their belongings behind? Their curiosity piqued, they decided to approach the campsite staff. The staff were equally baffled. The missing campers were supposed to be the caretakers of the tent spots. They had no idea that their wardens had disappeared. The mystery deepened. Armed with a flashlight and a growing sense of apprehension, Jane and Susan decided to investigate the tents. They half expected to stumble upon a gruesome scene, the remnants of a horrific event forever etched into the fabric of the campground. As they gingerly unzipped the first tent, their hearts pounded in their chests. They were met with an anticlimax. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play, just sleeping bags, neatly laid out, and waiting for their owners to return. The second tent, yielded the same results. What could have caused such a sudden departure? Jane mused. Surely they wouldn't have left their belongings behind unless they were in a hurry or unless they didn't have a choice. Jane's voice trailed off, leaving her audience hanging on her every word. The fire crackled, punctuating the silence with its sporadic bursts of energy. The Rangers exchanged glances, each lost in their thoughts, the mystery of the abandoned campsite etching itself into their minds. No dead bodies, just sleeping bags. So were they taken by aliens, or did something far more sinister happen? We may never know, Jane concluded, her voice barely above a whisper. The fire flickered, casting long, dancing shadows around the group. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called out, its eerie cry echoing through the silent woods, adding another layer of mystery to the enigmatic tale of the abandoned campsite. Ranger Joe, a seasoned veteran of the parks, found himself in the throes of an experience that would chill him to his core. He was deep in the wilderness, miles away from the nearest semblance of civilization. He and his boss had stayed behind after the crew had left to wrap up a massive survey they'd been working on. The area they were in, secluded and silent, had always given off an unsettling vibe. Yet they had a task to complete, and they pressed on, undeterred. As they hunched over their maps, engrossed in their work, a bizarre noise filled the air. A deafening whomp that seemed to ripple through the silence, exerting a pressure that they could feel in their ears and chests. The sound was so alien, so out of place in the tranquil wilderness, that it sent a jolt of fear down their spines. Joe looked over at his boss, standing a mere 20 feet away. The color had drained from his face, his eyes wide with a terror that mirrored Joe's own. The sound came again, a second whomp, louder and more intense than the first. The pressure seemed to squeeze them, the chilling sensation prickling over their skin, raising every hair on end. Without a word, Joe's boss looked at him, his face a mask of fear. "Let's go," he said, the urgency in his voice cutting through the eerie silence. They packed up their gear in a flurry of motion, their earlier calm replaced by a desperate need to escape. The hike back to their truck was a blur, the fear propelling them forward. Even now, years later, Joe can still remember the chilling sensation that the mysterious whomp invoked. They never spoke of it again, the memory of that night buried deep in their minds. Yet the fear remained, lingering in the back of their thoughts, a chilling reminder of the unexplained. To this day, the source of that sound remains a mystery, leaving only chills and unanswered questions in its wake. Under the vast expanse of the South Texas sky, a lone tent stood, its occupant unaware of the spectral gathering on the outside. Ranger Sophie, a seasoned explorer, found herself in the heart of an unusual event that would etch itself into her memory. One night, under the watchful gaze of the stars, she was jolted awake from a deep sleep. An innate sense of unease gripped her. She could feel rather than hear the presence of something outside her tent. With years of camping and hiking under her belt, she didn't succumb to panic. Instead, she opted for a stealthy approach. Silently, with a patience born of experience, she unzipped the top of her tent, peering out into the dimly lit campsite. The colossal oak tree under which she had set up camp cast long, deceptive shadows across the ground, distorting shapes and obscuring details. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, what she saw next was nothing short of surreal. Over 40 coyotes, their forms ghostly under the scant moonlight, were silently milling around the campsite. Their quietness was unsettling, their movements shadowy whispers against the backdrop of the night. They sniffed and explored, oblivious or indifferent to Sophie's silent observation. She watched awestruck as they continued their spectral gathering, before eventually she retreated into her tent, the zip closing with an almost deafening finality. The following night, the disquieting silence was replaced by chilling howls that echoed through the vast expanse of the South Texas wilderness. The sound was haunting, a chilling serenade that seemed to reverberate from every direction. It was a sound that was, in many ways, more unnerving than the sight of the coyotes themselves. Even now, the echo of their howls haunts her, a chilling reminder of that uncanny night. It serves as an eerie lullaby, a spectral memory that lingers in the back of her mind, resurfacing every time she ventures into the woods. It's a tale of the unexpected, of the strange encounters that one can stumble upon under the vast expanse of the starlit sky. The woods hold more secrets than we can fathom, secrets that our brave rangers carry in their hearts. The tales we've shared so far, merely scratch the surface of the countless mysteries these guardians of nature have experienced. There's Ranger Bill, a stoic man of few words who once stumbled upon an abandoned cabin deep in the forest. The door was ajar, an eerie silence enveloping the place. Inside he found remnants of a meal left untouched, as if the inhabitants had vanished mid-bite. Bill never speaks of what he saw that day, but the haunted look in his eyes tells a story of its own. Then there's Ranger Emma, a seasoned explorer who once heard strange whispers on a windless night. She followed the sound, only to find herself standing before a desolate graveyard, untouched by time. The whispers grew louder, forming words she could not comprehend. Emma never disclosed what she heard that night, but her fear of the wind speaks volumes. And let's not forget Ranger Mike, a veteran of the woods, who one evening saw a flickering light deep within the forest. He followed the glow, only to find a campfire burning bright with no one in sight. As he approached, the flames died down, leaving only a cold, dark void. Mike never revealed what he found in that darkness, but he hasn't lit a campfire since. These are but a few of the unspoken tales, each one shrouded in mystery, each one adding a new layer of horror to the narrative. The Rangers carry these stories etched in their memory, a constant reminder of the enigmatic world they patrol. Tales too terrifying to recount, too chilling to forget. In the silent woods, their stories echo, a chilling testament to the mysteries that lurk in the darkness. As the campfire flickers and the night deepens, these tales remain, forever etched in the minds of those who dared to share them. The tales of the wild, of the unknown, of the inexplicable, told by those who braved the wilderness, our park rangers. One such tale, a chilling recount of an ordinary day turned extraordinary by a mysterious whomp sound. This sound, alien and intimidating, was not just heard but felt, rattling the ribcage and echoing in the ears of Ranger Joe. A sound that to this day remains unexplained. A sound that turned a serene forest into an eerie landscape of unknown threats. A sound that turned two seasoned rangers into scared men, fleeing from an unseen entity. Then there's the haunting tale of Ranger Sophie, who woke up to find herself surrounded by an uncanny gathering of coyotes. 40 pairs of eyes glowing in the scant moonlight, silently observing, silently threatening. A sight that would send chills down the spine of the bravest among us. A sight that turned into an auditory nightmare the next night, with the howls of the pack echoing through the woods. A sound that, even years later, Sophie thinks she hears when she's alone in the woods. These tales, my friends, are more than just stories. They are testaments to the courage of our park rangers. They are reminders of the mysteries that the wilderness holds. They are proof that in the heart of the woods, under the vast sky, there are phenomena that we cannot explain, experiences that we cannot rationalize. But these brave souls, these park rangers, they venture into the wilderness despite the unknown. They face these unexplained occurrences, these chilling experiences with courage and curiosity. They carry these tales with them, tales that become part of the lore of the wilderness. In the heart of the woods, under the vast sky, their stories live on, whispered in the rustling leaves and carried on the chilling wind. Then it was my turn. The circle fell silent, all eyes on me. I could feel the anticipation hanging heavy in the cold air. I steeled myself, took a deep breath, and began to share a tale from my past, a tale that still sends shivers down my spine. I was no stranger to the uncanny, the unexplained, but this story, it was different. It was a story from a time when I worked at a summer camp. A story of two young boys, a late-night bathroom trip, and an encounter that defied all logic and reason. As I began to narrate, the fire seemed to crackle louder, as if protesting against the eerie nature of my tale. Yet, I continued, my voice steady, my heart pounding. I could see the rapt attention in the eyes of my fellow rangers, their faces half hidden in the flickering firelight. As the fire crackled and the shadows danced, I began my tale. My story begins at a summer camp where the cabins were arranged in a perfect circle, surrounding a solitary center building. The camp was nestled in the heart of a vast wilderness, a place of tranquil beauty by day, yet eerily silent at night. The cabins, like sentinels, stood in a ring, their wooden facades blending seamlessly into the dense forest that encroached from all sides. The center building, a beacon in the dark, served as the camp's hub, housing the showers and bathrooms. It was a place of refuge, a place to cleanse and refresh before retreating back to the comfort of the cabins. In this secluded setting, I served as a park ranger, overseeing the safety and well-being of the campers. My days were filled with the joyful chaos of children's laughter, the crackle of campfires, and the serene hum of nature. But when the sun dipped below the horizon, a hush would fall over the camp, the wilderness around us becoming a vast, silent expanse. As the night grew darker, the isolation became more palpable. The only sounds were the occasional rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, and the soft whispers of the wind. Each night, the campers and I would retreat to our cabins, their wooden walls providing a sense of safety amidst the surrounding darkness. The cabins were our sanctuaries, our havens from the unknown that lurked outside. But even within these walls, the silence of the night seeped in, its stillness only broken by the occasional murmur of a dreaming child or the soft rustle of shifting bedsheets. One fateful night, just as we had all retired to our beds, a young camper requested to go to the bathroom. Little did I know, the tranquility of the camp was about to be shattered, and our peaceful sanctuary would soon become the backdrop for an encounter that still sends chills down my spine. The camper, a boy of just 12 years, and his bunkmate took off running towards the bathroom building. The night was dark, and the only light was from the distant flicker of the dying campfire. Suddenly, the air was ripped apart by the most chilling sound that could curdle your blood. Screams. The kind of screams that you hear in horror movies, the kind that echo in your mind long after they've stopped. These were not just any screams, but those of pure, unadulterated terror, as if every nightmare had come to life in that one instant. The campsite was immediately gripped with fear. The once peaceful night was now filled with an eerie sense of dread. The crunch of leaves underfoot, the rustling of the wind in the trees, all seemed to amplify the terror that had descended upon us. I, John, rushed out of the cabin, my heart pounding like a drum, adrenaline coursing through my veins. There, under the faint glow of the moon, were the two boys, sitting on the ground right outside the bathrooms. They clung to each other, their eyes wide with fear. Their faces were as white as sheets, and their bodies trembled as if they had just seen death itself. After what felt like an eternity, they managed to calm down enough to speak. Their voices were shaky, their words barely a whisper, as they recounted the horrifying experience. They said they had run into a man who appeared out of nowhere right before they reached the bathroom door. He was standing in the doorway, blocking their path. The boys couldn't stop in time and had run through him, their hands pushing against a chilling cold air that surrounded him. They described the man as having a suit on, his hair slicked back, black as the night. But what was most unsettling was the smile on his face, a chilling, haunting smile that seemed to linger even after he had disappeared. They said they ran through a man in a suit with slicked back hair and a chilling smile. This encounter, this brush with the unknown, would forever change their lives and mine. The boys were in shock, holding each other, their faces pale in the dim moonlight. They were shivering, not from the cold, but from the sheer terror that had consumed them. The echoes of their screams still lingered in the air, a chilling reminder of the horrifying spectacle they'd just witnessed. We had to call their parents. It was the middle of the night, and the camp was quiet except for the sound of hushed whispers and hurried footsteps. The phone call was a difficult one. How do you explain to a worried parent that their child had just run through a spectral figure in the middle of the night? As dawn broke, the boys packed their bags, their faces still etched with fear. They didn't speak much, their eyes darting nervously around as if expecting the apparition to appear again. Their parents arrived, their faces a mix of confusion and concern as they hugged their shaken sons. The boys left the camp, their summer adventure cut short by an encounter they would never forget. The camp was left in a state of unease. The air was heavy with tension, a stark contrast to the jovial atmosphere of the previous day. The campfire stories had taken on a real-life horror twist, and the laughter and banter had been replaced with hushed whispers and wide-eyed glances. The other kids were scared, their innocent summer fun replaced with a fear they couldn't understand. The rest of the summer was different. The cheerful chatter was replaced with an eerie silence. The campfire stories were no longer tales of adventure but whispered accounts of the ghostly figure. The bathrooms, once a place of harmless pranks, were now approached with trepidation. The camp was no longer a place of joy and camaraderie, but a place haunted by the memory of that night. No kid goes home from summer camp, but that night they did. It still freaks me out. The encounter left a deep impact, not just on the boys, but on all of us at the camp. The story of that eerie night, the chilling screams, and the haunting image of the man in the suit quickly spread like wildfire among our tight-knit community of rangers and campers. It wasn't just another ghost story shared around a campfire. It was something we lived through, an experience that had shaken us to our core. The boys, once filled with youthful energy and the spirit of adventure, were now quiet and withdrawn. The laughter and playful banter that once echoed through the camp were replaced by an unsettling silence. The camp, once a sanctuary for summer escapades, was now tainted with an air of uneasiness. For me, John, it was a stark awakening. I was no longer just a park ranger, keeping an eye out for physical threats like forest fires or wild animals. I was now a guardian against the unseen, the inexplicable. The supernatural was no longer confined to tales spun around the campfire after sundown. It had manifested itself in reality, in the most terrifying manner. The other rangers and I, we were different too. We were more vigilant, more aware. Every rustle in the bushes, every whisper of the wind, every shadow cast by the moonlight was scrutinized. We were no longer just custodians of the physical world. We were now wardens of the spectral, the ethereal. But most importantly, we were changed. Our skepticism was replaced with belief, our mockery with respect. We understood that the supernatural was not a mere figment of imagination, but a reality that could intersect with our lives in the most unexpected ways. We learned to coexist with it, to respect it, and to fear it. The memory of that night still sends shivers down my spine, a chilling reminder of the unknown lurking in the shadows. And so, our tale of the campfire horrors comes to an end. Until next time, sleep tight. Before we part ways, dear viewers, remember to stay vigilant. The campfire horrors may have been extinguished for now, but the embers of the unknown always remain. As you lay down to sleep tonight, don't forget the lessons from our tale. Safety is but a fleeting moment in a world of unseen. So, if you've enjoyed this journey into the abyss, don't forget to ring that bell and smash that like button. Do it before the thing under your bed decides to pay you a visit. Oh, and keep those night lights on. You never know what might be lurking in the dark. Thank you for embarking on this terrifying adventure with us. Until our paths cross again in another tale of the unknown. Goodbye and sweet dreams, if you can.